Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the 9th episode in which, rather than Hinata's father, a young Uzumaki Naruto foils Kumo's kidnapping attempt. However, he receives a severe wound in the process, jeopardizing his shinobi career. That is, if not for a certain fox stepping in and offering Naruto the Hokage to be a reward for his heroism. Witness Naruto's newfound power and unique perspective. This story comes from Story Seeker 7. Make certain to support him, her. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. Konoha Hokage Tower. Hiruzen slumped into his chair, feeling the full weight of his failures. So let me get this straight, he said to the three children standing in front of him. While a group of missing nin attacked the village, a second group attacked you and your friends, killing one of your watchers, wounded and knocked out one of my jonin. Then proceeded to kidnap Yakumo, the heiress, to the Kurama clan. The three children nodded. Yes, Hokage-sama, Hinata said with a shaky voice. It was even admirable that she did not stutter. At the same time, one of the attackers, a tall thin-looking man, would have killed all of you if it were not for Yakumo placing him and all of you under a Genjutsu. Again, the children nodded. Hiruzen took a breath to brace himself for the next part of the report. Then, once you all woke up, you realized Yakumo had been taken. Correct? He got more nods. It was then that Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto Uzumaki, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shikamaru Nara decided to go after the kidnappers to rescue the girl. While you, Ino Yamanaka, Choji Akimichi, and Hinata Hyuga, while carrying an unconscious Kurenai Yuhi, returned to the village. Yes, Hokage-sama, Hinata said, stepping up. We wanted to warn you about what was happening. I see, Hiruzen said, closing his eyes. He tried to process everything he had heard. He opened his eyes and looked at the children, and found his heart growing heavier. If he had just been a bit more vigilant, had his shinobi tightened security a little more, then maybe. He shook his head. Now was not the time to dwell on the past. You three are dismissed, he said. The children looked on at him in surprise. But Hokage-sama? Ino said, stepping to Hiruzen's desk. Aren't you going to do something about this? Our friends are in danger, and if we don't do something, we might never see them again. Hiruzen raised his hand up to stop the girl's protest. Not to worry, Ino-san, he said in a soothing voice. I will do everything in my power to rescue your friends and bring these men to justice. He meant every word of it. These men, these so-called shinobi, had attacked his village, killed dozens of its citizens and wounded hundreds more. Killed one of his shinobi and wounded several others. Then they kidnapped one of the village's children and, if not for some clever thinking, would have killed several promising youths. While the children in the room saw the face of a kindly grandfather, under that mask, a storm was raging. If he ever got his hands on these men, he would teach them why the elemental nation feared him as the god of shinobi. The Yamanaka heiress looked like she was ready to protest more, when her father placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Listen to the Hokage, Ino. Your friends will be safe. Come on, I'll take you home. Ino opened her mouth to say something, then stooped and nodded. Inochi nodded at his daughter and looked at the Hokage. Hokage-sama, he said with a bow. If you allow me, I'll be taking these three home. I'm sure it's been a long day. Hiruzen nodded at the man. Return as soon as they are safely home. I may need your expertise soon. Inoichi nodded and led the children out of the room. Before the door closed, Hinata turned to face the Hokage. Please save them, she said before walking out. When the door closed, Hiruzen's mask fell. So, what do you think? He asked the assembled group of Jonin and Anbu. I say we got some brave academy students, a Jonin said with a smile. Troublesome would be a better word. Shikaku commented. A faint smile tugged at Hiruzen's lips. They were right on both accounts. Minato, you would be so proud of how your son has turned out. He thought before another thought came in. You would be too, Kushina. But you would want to skin your boy alive for the heart attack. The boy was true to his lineage both as a Namikaze and an Uzumaki. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Itachi had a smile on his lips that felt like a mixture between pride and concern. Hiruzen shook his thoughts off and got back to the matter. That is not what I meant, he said. What I meant was, what do you think of the attack in the village being a distraction from their true objective? Shikaku nodded. It was a clever if a bit blunt strategy, he said. With the mess the first group caused, we never noticed them making their move in the forest. Because of that, they were able to secure their objective. That objective being Kurama Yakumo. Hiruzen said. Hokage-sama, forgive if I sound callous. A jonin said. But why would they go after a girl from a clan that, while prominent in our village, has fallen into obscurity? In that forest clearing, they had children from more well-known clans and heirs, no less. Hell, they had a main branch Hyuga and an Uchiha. So why go after her when they had better options? You forget what the Kurama were known for. Itachi said, stepping up. Members of the Kurama were once widely feared for their talent with Genjutsu. They were able to cast illusions so powerful that their victims were known to harm themselves. Harm themselves? The jonin questions. Like took their weapons and hurt themselves? More than that. Itachi explained. It's been recorded that people caught under their genjutsu would spontaneously form injuries on their bodies. Bruises, cuts, and gashes would suddenly open up without any attack or weapon having been seen touching them. In some cases, bones would break without warning. The jonin now had a frightened expression on his face, as did several others in the room. That can't be. It's impossible. Itachi nodded. And yet it seems to be. There is some speculation that their genjutsus are even strong enough to affect the Sharingan. You can't be serious. How can any genjutsu affect the Sharingan? As I said, it is only speculation. Itachi said. But it is a theory many of my clansmen are not inclined to test. What Itachi is getting at, Shikaku said. Is that these men or whoever hired them knew who the girl is and what her clan is capable of. Another jonin in the room spoke, a kunoichi. You don't think they plan to use her for her abilities? Maybe even create a new Kurama clan? It's the only reason I can think of. Shikaku said. If we don't find the kidnappers soon, we may very well face an army of such people in a few generations. Unfortunately, that will be easier said than done. Itachi said. We don't know where the missing nin have gone or if they are still in the village. It is possible they have already fled the village with their prize. Shikaku shook his head. I doubt it. If I had to guess, their plan is to lay low for a while we frantically look for signs of more attacks on the village. He's right. A jonin said. If those kids hadn't told us what happened, we still would be preparing for more attacks. We would have never thought anyone would try to escape the village. Shikaku lazily nodded. In a few days, they have slipped by, and we would have been none the wiser. Now that we do know, we can begin to search the village for them. The trouble is we may have a limited time to find them. Once they realize that their deception has failed, they may accelerate their plans. Hiruzen listened closely as his shinobi discussed what they could do. Some suggested that they have every shinobi search the village, while others cautioned for a more subtle approach. The Hokage smiled as he took notice of something the others hadn't. Everyone, Hiruzen said, getting the room's attention. I believe I may have a solution to our problem. He made a gesture to the ceiling. Confused, most of the assembled shinobi looked up where he was pointing. For a moment, none of them saw anything. When the pair of eyes started to move, was when they took notice. Most quickly realized what this meant, with a few looking confused and eyeing the eyeballs with suspicion. The eyeballs came to a stop above Hiruzen's desk. I believe Naruto may have already found where the kidnappers are. He'll be showing us where they are. One of the jonin had a frown on his face. So, do we just follow these eyeballs or something? Hiruzen's smile grew. Even better, young Naruto has developed a new technique with his Kekkai Genkai. One that will be demonstrated now. Hiruzen made a quick hand sign to the eyes. The eyes seemingly nodded and floated higher up, then looked down at the desk. The rest of the room looked on, wondering what their Hokage meant. They answer when the eyes shoot out beams of light that connect together at the center of the desk. Those beams then expanded, creating a cone of light. That cone of light then started to coalesce into a series of images. When the light stopped, everyone in the room was staring in surprise. Hiruzen's smile remained, staring at the assembled jonin and Anbu. The old Hokage could already see the gears in Shikaku's mind going into overdrive, thinking up all the implications of what he was seeing. The Nara clan head walked up to the Hokage's desk. "Hokage-sama?" he asked, waving his hand across the desk. "Is this what I think it is?" Hiruzen nodded. "Indeed. I was just as surprised as you were when Naruto-kun showed me his new technique a month ago," he explained. "I believe you can see where it can be useful." "More than useful," Shikaku said, removing his hand from the image of the Konoha being projected on the Hokage's desk. "This could be game-changing." Shikaku continued to stare at the projection, and Hiruzen knew that the young Uzumaki had another supporter in creating his new clan. "Is this a live image of the village?" Shikaku asked. "Or this based on Uzumaki's memory?" "I believe at the moment it's more on his memory." "A remarkably good memory," Hiruzen noted. "But he can transmit live images. Even project events as they happen." Shikaku was rubbing his chin. The possibilities that this presents in the field of intelligence gathering, and even strategic planning. It's almost overwhelming. Hiruzen nodded, having thought the same. Unfortunately, since they're only eyes, Naruto can't transmit any sound. Only images. Shikaku hummed. The images alone are useful. Plus, the sound problem can be mitigated if Naruto learns how to lip read. Hiruzen agreed and had already asked Hayashi to teach Naruto how to. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it would help. We'll discuss the possibilities this technique presents to us later. Right now, we have some children to rescue. Hiruzen made a hand sign for Naruto to continue his demonstration. The image zoomed in on a section of the village. Slowly as to give everyone in the room the chance to figure out where they were looking at. It stopped at what appeared to be a warehouse. Shikaku's eyes narrowed. Hiruzen already knew that the Nara was replaying the images in his head. As were Itachi and a few others in the room. If I'm not mistaken. I believe this is an abandoned warehouse somewhere on the west side of the village. You're right, Shikaku-san. Itachi said. It's close to the red light district. Not a bad hiding place. The young man noted. We don't have many patrols there, and the warehouse is located in a secluded part of the village. That'll have to change. Shikaku said. On that, Hiruzen could agree. He was already thinking of expanding on the number of patrols in the village. It probably would not hurt to talk to Fugaku about expanding his police department too. We'll talk about that later. For now, we must focus on the situation at hand. Hiruzen signed to Naruto, asking him if he knew how many enemy shinobi they were dealing with. The image shifted, showing the inside of the warehouse. Several figures were shown. Hiruzen counted around 6. Counting in the attackers in the village. That made for around 9 enemy shinobi. 9 enemy shinobi that had somehow managed to make it into Konoha. Undetected. How could they let something like that happen? Were there that many holes in their security? Had they grown that lax in their time of peace? The figures were focused on allowing the room a good look at their faces. Does anyone recognize them? Hiruzen asked. One moment, Hokage-sama. One of his shinobi said, pulling out a bingo book. After a few moments of flipping through pages, the shinobi stopped. Here we are, he said, placing the book on Hiruzen's desk. It showed the picture of one of the men in the image. Ohara Daichi, Shikaku read off. According to this, he's a former jonin from IWA. He led a coup against the Tsuchikage but was driven off with most of his followers killed or captured. Hiruzen closed his eyes, thinking about the information for a moment. It sounded familiar to him. I remember Jiraiya mentioning an incident in IWA about 3 years ago. Could that be it? Most likely, the date given here lines up. Shikaku said. He's labeled as a rank missing with a kill on sight order. He's got a 20 million yen bounty on his head. His known followers are also listed with their ranks and bounties. They all have kill on sight orders. Hiruzen motioned to one of his shinobi. Have the examiners identify the bodies and see if any of them show in the bingo books. The shinobi nodded and left the room. How many names are on that list? Quite a few, Hokage-sama. Shikaku said. But I doubt he brought everyone under him into the village. Maybe he'll have a team waiting at a rendezvous point outside of Konoha somewhere. I think it is safe to assume that the 5 others are all he has with him. Hiruzen agreed with the Nara man. He looked over at Itachi. I want you to go through this book and identify all the men we saw. I want to know who we are dealing with before I send out a rescue team. Itachi nodded. Yes, Hokage-sama. If I may be allowed to make a request. Hiruzen nodded. I would like to lead the rescue team myself. Any reason why? Hiruzen already suspected why. The Kurama girl is close to my brother. Itachi said. I am not surprised he chose to go after the kidnappers rather than return to the village. I'm also worried for him. You're afraid he and the others might have been caught? Shikaku said. Itachi nodded. I believe in my brother's skills, and his friends do not lack for ability either. However, they are still academy students, and these missing nin are fully trained shinobi with years of experience. It would seem that your fears are well-founded. Hiruzen said when the image shifted again. It was showing a storage room. Crates were stacked around the room, and in the middle of the room was Yakumo. She was sitting up against one of the crates with her head held to her knees. It came as a relief to see that the girl was mostly unharmed. However, she was not the only one in the room. 5 others sat around in the room, 4 boys and a dog. Hiruzen looked up at Itachi. There's no more time to delay. Once other missing nin are identified, take a team to the warehouse. Your primary objective is rescuing the children being held hostage by the enemy. If possible, your secondary object will capture the enemy nin for interrogation. Consider this an A-rank mission. Itachi nodded. Yes, Hokage-sama. He said. I accept this mission, and I will succeed. Hiruzen nodded. Good. Inu will command a secondary team to act as your backup should you need it. He explained. All available shinobi will be deployed to prevent any escape by the missing nin. Is that understood? Everyone in the room said. Yes, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen let a breath. He could feel his back aching and the throbbing in his head. He really was getting too old for this job. He looked out the window and sent out a silent prayer. Please, Kami, if you are listening. I have seen enough tragedy in my life. Please do not let this day end in it. Abandoned warehouse, storage room. Yakumo was crying, even though her sobs had long since fallen silent. That much Sasuke was certain of. Her knees were tucked together with her head buried on top. Her shoulders constantly shook. Sasuke hated it. A girl like Yakumo shouldn't have to cry. He figured with the life she had, Yakumo had cried enough in her life. It was something he wanted to change. Plus, she didn't look as pretty when she was crying. However, Sasuke had one problem. He didn't know how to stop her from crying. He wouldn't admit it, but Sasuke wasn't very good at the whole feelings thing. While he had his moments, he was more withdrawn than most people. He preferred to keep his feelings to himself. He wasn't like Naruto, who could open up to anyone seconds after meeting them. Nor did he have the ability to make others open up to him. He remembered his brother describing him as being an introvert. That was honestly the best way to describe him. He looked away from Yakumo and looked at Naruto. He silently willed the blonde-haired dope to help him with this. Naruto looked at him and shook his head. You need to do this. But I can't. You know I'm no good at this. True. But she is your friend. You need to be the one to do it. She would do the same for you. Sasuke sighed. Fine. But if I somehow make things worse, I'm blaming you. Naruto gave him one of his trademarked fox smiles. Sasuke shook his head. It was funny and weird how he, Naruto, and Hinata could have these types of conversations without having to speak a word. He supposed it was a sign of their close bond. Though sometimes it could be a bit frustrating, given how much of a trickster Naruto was. He looked over at Yakumo and briefly wondered if he could do it with her one day. Here goes nothing. Sasuke whispers. He reached out to the girl. With a moment of hesitation, he touched her shoulder. With a start, Yakumo looked up at Sasuke. A heavy set of tears were streaming down from her eyes. They really did take away from how pretty she was. Sasuke opens his mouth to speak, suddenly aware of how dry his throat felt. It's going to be alright, Yakumo-chan. He said, unaware of the honorific he slipped in. We're going to be okay. We'll get out of this, to which he silently adds, somehow. But if it weren't for me, Yakumo began. You wouldn't be here. Sasuke almost felt like he had been stabbed. How could Yakumo be blaming herself like this? It was the kidnapper's fault that they were here, not hers. It's not your fault. Sasuke began. But it is. Yakumo cut him off. If you had never met me, if I never been in the forest clearing, none of you would be here with me. Sasuke swallowed. He tried to imagine a world where he had never met Yakumo. He imagines going to the same forest clearing and finding no one there. He found that he couldn't imagine such a world. In the forest clearing, he kept seeing that same girl painting on the hill. If we never met you. Sasuke said, tightening his grip on Yakumo's shoulder. You would be here alone. No one would have known that you were kidnapped. He hated that thought. Knowing that in another time, Yakumo would be in this warehouse all alone. No one would have come to rescue you. Maybe that would have been for the best. Yakumo said. If Sasuke felt like he had been stabbed a moment ago. This was the feeling of someone twisting the blade in his heart. What? Yakumo smiled. But it was not a happy one. It was the sad kind of smile that belonged on no one's face, let alone Yakumo's. Maybe it's best that I'd be alone. Maybe it's a good thing that I'm being taken away. But why? Sasuke said. What makes you think that you deserve to be taken away? Why was it so hard for Yakumo to look at the good in her life? Because I'm a monster. She admitted. Sasuke's eyes widened, and from the corners of his eyes, he saw the others look at her astonished. I'm a witch that causes nothing but suffering to everyone around me. Maybe it's for the best that I be taken away. That way no one else will get hurt. Sasuke was surprised. But not at what Yakumo said, not entirely. What surprised him was what he felt at that very moment. Anger. Pure anger flashed across his being like a lightning bolt striking the ground. Sasuke shot up, almost pulling Yakumo to her feet. What? Bullshit! Sasuke screamed. How can you believe crap like that? You a monster? A witch? What made her think like this? Who made her think like that? His mind briefly went to Yakumo's uncle. Even though his anger intensified, somehow, he knew that the man was not responsible. At least not the complete one at fault. He suspected the man did have a hand in it. Maybe unwittingly, maybe not. Either way, if Sasuke ever saw the man again, he would have some words with him. He felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked over, seeing Naruto. Sasuke, calm down. Calm down. Sasuke repeated his friend's words. Calm down. Yakumo just called herself a monster, and you expect me to calm down? Naruto backed away from Sasuke, surprised by the anger that Sasuke was displaying. I just didn't want you to scare Yakumo, Naruto said. Sasuke glanced at Yakumo. Seeing the frightened expression on her face, some of his anger was quelled. Taking a breath, Sasuke knelt in front of the girl and placed both of his hands on her shoulders. Look here, Yakumo, Sasuke said firmly. You are not a monster or witch. You are the kindest, sweetest, most beautiful girl I have ever met. Anyone who tells otherwise is wrong. But I am a monster, Yakumo protested. I cause nothing but misery for everyone around me. If people knew what I really was, they would never want to be friends with me. You wouldn't want to be friends with me. Sasuke frowned. You're wrong, Yakumo, he said just above a whisper. I do want to be your friend. I am your friend. He corrected himself at the end. All of us in here we care about. He gestured to the others in the room. Naruto, Shikamaru, and Kiba all nodded in agreement. Akamaru barked happily before he walked up to the Kurama girl and placed his head on her lap. He's right, Naruto said. You are the nicest and sweetest girl I know. Though I'm not so sure about the most beautiful. I'm pretty sure that would be Hinata. He got thumped on the head by Shikamaru. You're not helping. Sasuke made a point to ignore them. You're not a monster, Yakumo, he said. Even if you were, I would still want to be your friend. But you don't know anything about me, Yakumo said. If you knew the secret my clan has. If you knew the price that our abilities came with. Then tell us, Sasuke said, stopping the Kurama girl in her argument. We want to know. We're all here for you. The others were gathering around them. Yakumo opened her mouth and then closed it. You sure you really want to know? Yakumo asked. To know what it will mean to be friends with me? Sasuke nodded, as did the others. We do. Yakumo remained silent for a moment. On her face, Sasuke could see a battle being raged. She seemed to debate whether she would tell them the secrets of the Kurama clan. Yakumo came to a decision. Alright, I'll tell you. Konoha rooftops, en route to the abandoned warehouse. Itachi jumped from one rooftop to another. He was going as fast as he could without giving off too much of his churka. Aside from the leader, they had identified 2 more of the kidnappers. But the other 3 were a mystery. If one of them was a sensor type, they had to keep their chakra suppressed. Jumping to another rooftop, Itachi looked over his shoulder. Behind him were 6 other shinobi of the leaf. 2 of them wore ANBU uniforms, and the other 4 had jonin vests on. His eyes landed on one individual in particular. Izumi, his girlfriend and the woman he hoped to marry one day. She had volunteered to join the rescue mission. However, there had been something off about it. Flashback: Itachi and the others were moving past the doors to the Hokage tower when they encountered 2 familiar figures, Izumi and Shizune. "Itachi, what's going on?" Izumi asked. "What's with the rush?" Itachi quickly explained the situation to his girlfriend. "What? Sasuke's been taken?" "More like he wants after the kidnappers himself," Itachi explained. "Then he got caught." Izumi shook her head. "That doesn't matter. We have to hurry and rescue him." "We?" Itachi questioned. "I'm coming with you," Izumi said firmly. "Something tells me that you will need all the help you can get." That was when Shizune grabbed Izumi by her arm. She whispers something to the woman. Itachi wasn't sure what she was saying, but it sounded something like, "You sure, and with your condition?" Izumi looked annoyed. "Yes, I'm sure," she said, pulling her arm away. "Besides, they need all the help they can get." Itachi raised an eyebrow. Was there something that Izumi wasn't telling him? "Is something the matter?" he asked. Izumi shook her head. "Nothing right now," she dismissed. At the skeptical look from Itachi, she clarified. "I'll tell you later." Itachi wanted to press her on the subject, but he shook his head. There was little time to waste. He would ask her later. Right now, they had a mission. Flashback and try as he might, Itachi couldn't shake the moment from his mind. Nor could he shake the feeling that he was making a mistake by bringing her along on the mission. That he should have left her behind. But try as he might, Itachi could not come up with an adequate reason to leave her. Not without knowing what the 2 women were talking about. Izumi pulled up alongside him. "Something on your mind?" she asked him. Itachi shook his head. His thoughts were showing again to her. "Nothing," he said. "What were you and Shizune talking about earlier?" he asked. "Shizune seemed to be against you joining the mission." "I told you before. It's nothing you need to worry about," Izumi said. "At the very least, it's nothing that will impede my ability to carry out this mission." Itachi had a tight frown on his lips. Something inside him was telling him it was not nothing as Izumi would have him believe. Something that, if he knew, would have impacted his decision to let her join the mission. "You sure?" he pressed. Izumi looked at him for a moment as she seemed to think over her options. "I'm sure," she said. "I can tell you later, after we rescue your brother and the others." A smile crept onto her lips. "Besides, I think you'll be very happy with what I have to tell you." Again, Itachi wanted to press Izumi on the subject. But there was no time. Up ahead, he could see the abandoned warehouse where the missing Nin were holding up. Where his little brother and his friends were being held. "All right, people," Itachi began a quick briefing. "Our mission is simple. We are to infiltrate the abandoned warehouse where the missing Nin are hiding out in. Our objective is twofold. First, we are to subdue the missing Nin and bring them in for interrogation. Try to disable the enemy. But if it comes down to you or them, always choose them. Understood?" "Hi." Itachi nodded. Secondly, we are to rescue the hostages they have taken. 5 in total: Kiba Inuzuka, Yakumo Kurama, Shikamaru Nara, Naruto Uzumaki, and not least of all, my brother Sasuke Uchiha. Since this is also a rescue operation, we will have to be careful to make sure the children will not be caught in the crossfire. Is that understood?" "Hi." Everyone said. "Hi." Izumi said. Finally, there is a secondary team led by Inu. Itachi explained. He will act as our backup should the need come. The rest of our shinobi forces have been deployed to prevent the enemy from escaping. They were nearing the abandoned warehouse. A few more rooftops, and they would engage the enemy. Itachi sent out a small prayer to the heavens. Sasuke, just hang in there a little bit longer. Please be careful. Abandoned warehouse, storage room, alright, I'll tell you. Yakumo said. You can't do that. The shadow shouted in her mind. I need to. Yakumo said to the shadow. I have to know. What is there to know? The shadow questions. Once they find what kind of monster you are, they'll turn on you. No one can ever love a monster. If you tell them, you will lose any chance you had at a happy life in this miserable world. They won't turn on me. Yakumo said. They will accept me. They said so themselves. She could hear the shadow growling in her mind. How can you be so certain? What if everything you've seen up until now has been an act? They're waiting for their chance to turn on you. I guess there's only one way to find out. Yakumo said firmly. You're making a mistake. The shadow growls. One you will dearly regret. Maybe, Yakumo admitted. But it is something I have to do. She was tired of the secrets. Of hiding who she really was. She had to know one way or another if Sasuke and the others would accept her. But. Be quiet. Yakumo shouts at the shadow. I have a story to tell. The shadow remained quiet, but Yakumo could still feel its presence in the back of her mind. She looked at her friends, seeing they were waiting for her to begin. You all know of my clan's specialty, correct? The boys nodded. Your clan is widely known and feared for their talent with Genjutsu. Shikamaru said. Yakumo nodded. We are. She confirmed. Our Genjutsus are so powerful that they can alter a person's perception of reality. In many cases, our victims are known to harm themselves. Naruto had a frown on his face. When you say harm themselves, what do you mean? He asked. Like, do they actually hit themselves or cut themselves? Yakumo shook her. No, not like that. Though that has happened before. She explained. No, it's a bit more literal than that. I think a more accurate way would be to say that injuries just appear on their bodies. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. Just appear? Yakumo nodded. Something like that. For example, if the victim gets cut in the Genjutsu, say on the right arm. A physical cut will appear on their right arm in the real world. As though they had been cut by an actual blade. She started to see the mental gears work in the boys' heads. After a moment, Kiba whistled. That's actually pretty cool and scary at the same time. Remind me never to piss you off. Yakumo smiled. Thanks. She said. Shikamaru was looking at her more critically. I remember my dad telling me something about your clan's abilities. He mentions that people have been known to die in your Genjutsus. The others looked at him, then back to her. Is that true? Yes, it's true. She confirmed with a nod of her head. Though it's not like we can cause a person's head to spontaneously separate it from their body. Or cause their hearts to explode. But if they do die in one of Genjutsus, they die in the real world. That's, Sasuke began, uncertain what to say to that. Yakumo couldn't blame him. What else were you supposed to say after learning your friend could kill just making a person think they died? That's impressive. He said in a clear voice. But Yakumo could hear the hesitation in his voice. He's afraid of you now. The shadow whispers in her head. He now knows you're little more than a witch who relishes in human suffering. You sure you want to make things worse by telling them about me? Yakumo ignored the shadow's taunting. It's because of this that the Kurama clan became so feared through the elemental nations. We were a clan to be respected and not to be reckoned with. Though in recent generations, the Kurama clan has lost some of its prestige. That's because fewer of your clansmen have retained the same talent for Genjutsu that your ancestors had. Correct? Shikamaru summarized. Correct. Yakumo said. Because of that, our clan has been on the decline. In some ways, it looked as though our clan would be lost to obscurity. That is until I was born. Not only did I retain my clan's talent, but they were more potent than any other recorded in our clan's history. Naruto looked confused. Shouldn't that be a good thing? He asked. If your clan has been on the decline and suddenly someone like you comes along, shouldn't that have made your clan happy? Yakumo slowly nodded. So why does your clan fear you so much? Why keep you locked up when you could be their one chance to make their clan great again? Yakumo bit her lip. A moment of hesitation taking over. That's because it ties to the secret of the Kurama clan. She said. Yes, my clan is blessed. Our talent for Genjutsu has made us feared and respected throughout the elemental nations. But it did not come without a price. In the same that the Kurama clan is blessed, it is also cursed. Cursed. Sasuke mutters. How? Yakumo wrapped her arms around her body. The moment of truth was fast approaching, and she wasn't sure if she should be thrilled or terrified. Our abilities are powerful. She began. Too powerful, in fact. We alone can't control our genjutsus. You can't control your own powers? Sasuke questions. Then how do you use your powers if you can't control them? Yakumo smiled. Simple, we manifest a second personality. A second personality? Shikamaru asks. Yakumo nodded. It is this second personality that we call the Ito, which controls our powers. Through them, we can create some of the most powerful genjutsus in the world. Shikamaru hummed. So does this Ito have full control over the genjutsu, or do you some sway over what it does? The later, Yakumo confirmed. The Ito is meant to be an engine for Kurama to control their abilities. At a young, we're supposed to learn how to control our Ito. She could almost feel the shadow's malicious smile. No one can control me. Especially not you, little girl. But they don't always succeed. Do they? Naruto asked. No, they don't. Yakumo confirmed with a nod of her head. We don't. Sasuke cleared his throat. What happens then? He asked. Is that fear I detect in his voice? The shadow said. You haven't even managed to tell them about me, and they are already scared of you. Are you sure you want to tell them the rest of this story? It was getting harder for Yakumo to ignore the thing. In most circumstances, when a member of my clan loses control of their Ito. She hesitated for a moment. They usually go insane, sometimes even losing complete control of their powers. The stronger their abilities, the worse it gets for them. Is that why your clan tries to isolate you so much? Sasuke asked. Because they're afraid that you'll lose your mind? There really was no hiding the fear in his voice. He should be afraid. The shadow mocked. Wait until they hear the rest of your sad little tale. Then they'll be terrified. Though, to be frank, I find it to be more funny than scary. A witch that can't control her own monster. Said monster chuckled to itself. Yakumo shook her head. There's a bit more to that. She explained. She could feel her heartbeat getting faster and louder. While we think of it as a second personality, the Ito isn't a separate and distant entity. It can't act on a will of its own. In truth, it's really another facet of our personalities. When a Kurama loses control and goes insane, the Ito usually vanishes as their mind falls apart. Shikamaru was the one to pick up on what she was implying. But yours is different. Yakumo shallowed. When I was born, my abilities were stronger than any other in recent generations. Stronger than any other in the history of our clan. At first, no one thought anything of it. She had a vague recollection of that time. How happy every in her clan seemed to be. To them, it seemed like Kami had answered their prayers. Answered their prayers? Kiba asked. The Kurama clan has been on the decline for some time. Shikamaru explained for her. From what my dad has told me, the abilities of the Kurama clan have weakened in the last few generations. Because of that, they have been unable to produce capable shinobi. But that Yakumo was born. Sasuke said. Yakumo continued her story. To them, I was a blessing in a time of need. The clan was on the decline. At the time, I was the best chance the Kurama had to return to their former glory. But something happened. Naruto said/stated. You're Ito. It's different from the rest of your clan. Like my powers, my Ito was more powerful than others recorded in the clan's history. Yakumo said. She paused for a moment. She knew her following words would change everything for her. Would Sasuke and the others accept her? Or would they turn against her? You've already told them this much. The shadow said in a cruel tone. Why not tell them the rest now? You wouldn't want them to get a false impression of you. So powerful that it actually, Yakumo paused again. That it did what? Sasuke asked, leaning in. He and the others in the room were hanging on to every word. Yakumo took a breath and braced herself for what comes next. That it grew to be a separate and distant entity in my mind. Because of that, I can't control it like the rest of my clansmen can with theirs. Whenever I try to use my powers, it tries to take control and turns my genjutsus into living nightmares. She saw the looks of growing horror on Sasuke's face. More than a few of my clansmen have been caught in my genjutsus when I lost control. They become trapped in their worst nightmares. She remembered those times. How the joy and love slowly turned into fear. How the smiles and praise steadily turned to whispers of fear. How some began to call her a curse on the Kurama clan. This entity is cruel and takes pleasure in the suffering of others. Every day I try to control it, and every night it torments me in my dreams. The flames, they were always there, and she could never block out the screams. My parents and, for a while, my uncle were the only ones to support me. Sasuke's expression had become unreadable, while the others looked like they had seen something unsettling. Your parents? Naruto asked. Yakumo smiled as the memories of her parents flashed across her mind. They were the only ones that didn't look at me in fear. And supported me no matter how bad my Ito got. She remembers how her mother held her on days when the shadow was particularly bad. A tight frown formed on Yakumo's lips as an image of her mother showed saying something to her. But her words never materialized past her lips. When they died, only my uncle was left to support me. But he tried to isolate you from everyone. Kiba pointed out. How is that trying to support you? That's so she wouldn't hurt others. Shikamaru said. They've kept her locked up at the Kurama clan compound so that the only ones at risk is the clan. Image what would happen if she lost control in the middle of the village. He's a smart one. The shadow commented. Yakumo nodded. My uncle wanted to keep the village safe and to keep me safe. She said. Keep you safe? Kiba questions. What's that supposed to mean? To the surprise of everyone, Naruto answered. Because if this were to get out, people would begin to fear her. Everyone looked at the blindfolded boy, who uncharacteristically had a serious and solemn expression on his face. They'll think she's some kind of witch or demon. Yakumo winced, the boy had summed up her feelings perfectly. But they wouldn't do that. Sasuke argued back. They'd. Naruto cut him off. Trust me, Sasuke. People are not the most rational beings. Even if they are presented with all the facts, they'll go with their feelings. Yakumo didn't know why, but there was something in his voice that suggested that he knew what it was like. Shikamaru looked back at her. There's something else, isn't there? Yakumo should have known he would pick up on that. This Ito, it wants more than just to control over your genjutsus. Yakumo swallowed. There really was no avoiding it now. She had just stepped through a door and shut it behind her. Yes. She said. Its ultimate goal is to fully take over my mind and become the dominant personality. After that, I don't know what will happen. Oh, no, what will happen? Silence hung over the room. She looked between each of the boys, gauging their reactions. For the most part, they were a mixture of fear, worry, and confusion. Sasuke's expression, though, was unreadable. A shadow having been cast over his face. Wrapping her arms around herself, Yakumo lowered her head and waited. She waited for the words of hate. For Sasuke and his friends to ridicule her for thinking they would accept her. For them to call her witch and demon. What else did you think would happen? The shadow said. It is time you accepted reality. No one will ever love you. What she did not expect was for a pair of arms to wrap themselves around her. Yakumo looked up and saw that Sasuke was holding her tightly. What? She said quietly. I'm sorry. Sasuke said. Yakumo blinked, unsure she had heard Sasuke correctly. What? I am so sorry, Yakumo. Sasuke continued on. If I had known what you were going through. If I'd known about that thing. Why was Sasuke apologizing to her? Why was he holding her right now? Shouldn't he be repulsed by her now he knew the truth? Why wasn't he calling her names and telling her that he would never be friends with her? Why were the others not joining him? She glanced at the other boys in the room. They all had gathered around her. Smiling at her and giving her expressions she had never seen before. For a moment, she thought they were pitying her, but something told her they weren't. It was something else. Yakumo was confused. Why weren't they treating her like a monster? You had to go through all of that alone. You're so strong. Yakumo. Sasuke said. But now you don't have to fight it alone anymore. You have us now. Something tugged at Yakumo's heart. She didn't know, but a fresh stream of tears was leaking from her eyes. Why? Why are you doing this? She asked. Shouldn't you be afraid of me? Why would I be afraid of you? Sasuke asked. Because. Yakumo paused, confused by why Sasuke wasn't revolted by her. Because I'm a witch, a monster that only lives to torment others. Sasuke pulled away from the embrace, and for a moment, Yakumo thought she had gotten through to him. Her heart ached when she saw the anger in his eyes. What has that thing been telling you? His arms were still wrapped around her. He was spitting out obscenities at her. What has that thing been telling you to make you think like that? Called you monster, a witch? But it's true. Isn't it? Yakumo asked. Yes, it's all true. You're a witch. A monster. If she had been paying attention, she would have noticed the quiver in the shadow's voice. If Sasuke looked angry before, now he was furious. It's a lie. He said in a low growl. That thing has done nothing but fill your head with lies. You a monster? A witch only lives to harm others. Give me a break. You're the furthest thing from that. But? Yakumo's protest was cut short when she felt a finger on her lips. Sasuke's anger was gone, replaced by a gentle smile. You Yakumo Kurama are not a monster. You are not a witch. And most certainly do not exist to torment others. He said, taking his hand from her mouth and placing his hands firmly on her shoulders. You, Yakumo Kurama, are the kindest, most intelligent, and most beautiful girl I have ever met. The girl I met in the forest clearing is not that kind of person, and she would never do the things you say she would. He pulled her back into a tight embrace. I don't care what this Ito thing says about you. They're all lies. And I will keep telling you this until one day you believe it. Yakumo's arms reached up behind Sasuke's back as she struggled to process what he was saying. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't a witch. How could that be true? What was making him say that? But why? She asked. She didn't see it, but Sasuke was smiling. Because I'm your friend, and I want to help you. I don't care if you can control this Ito or not. I'll help you fight until you can. If it takes control of you, I'll find a way to bring you back. If I get caught up in one of your genjutsus, I'll know I will be safe because you will be there to hold it back. You don't have to fight it alone, you have me now, and I'll help you. You will? Yakumo asked. Don't listen to him. I will. Sasuke said. Lies. All lies. He's lying. And we'll be there for you too. Naruto said. Sasuke isn't the only one that'll help fight this, Ito. Kiba punched his hand. Yeah. If that creep does take you over, we'll beat it until it goes away. He said with a smile showing his fangs. Won't that involve beating Yakumo? Shikamaru pointed out. I don't think Sasuke will like that. What? No. The Inuzuka boy sputtered. I mean, yes. I mean, no. Yais. He groaned. You know what I mean. Naruto shook his head. As I said, we'll help you no matter what. He said. Besides, he added in a low whisper. You are not the only one with inner demons. Yakumo had little time to ponder on what he meant by that. We're here for you. Sasuke said. All of us, me, them. He gestures to the other boys. And others as well when you tell them. We'll all help. So, please. He pulled her back into an embrace. Let us help you. You don't have to fight on your own anymore. Yakumo couldn't speak, too choked up on her low sobs. It had been so long since anyone had said those words. So long since anyone was willing to help her. Not since her parents had been killed. She tightened her grip on the boy, almost like he was a lifeline. I. She started to say but could not find the words to convey what she felt. Thank you. She didn't know how long they remained like that. But eventually, the two pulled apart. Yakumo was sure she had soaked Sasuke's shirt. Tears were still coming down from her eyes, but in a slow trickle, instead of a stream. Thank you, Sasuke. She said, whipping the tears away. You don't know what it means to me to hear you say that. Sasuke rubbed the back of his neck. Fat hats because we're friends. He said with a blush. And friends help each other. Yakumo felt her cheeks warm. Friends. She had heard that word a lot recently. But only now did it have any meaning to her. It felt more real now. Yeah, friends. She said. I'm happy for you all. Shikamaru lazily said. And I'm sure we would all gladly help you. But there's one troublesome thing we're all forgetting here. What's that? Kiba asked. We're still here, Shikamaru said, motioning to the storeroom. I think it might be a good idea to figure out how to get out. Before we go dealing with Yakumo's inner demon. Naruto places his hands on the back of his head. I wouldn't worry about that. He said with a smile. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. Why? That was when the group of children heard the commotion outside. Deep within Yakumo's mind, the world around it was changing. It had been subtle at first, so the shadow had disregarded it. But now, the changes had become more pronounced. Within the mental landscape that was Yakumo's mind, the shadow balled its hands into fists. That boy was ruining everything. At first, the shadow had thought nothing of the boy. Just another face and another means it could use to torment its other half. Only now did it realize that had been a miscalculation. Its other was gaining strength, and the path to freedom was slowly being closed off. Oh, how it hated that boy. A sinister smile spread across the shadow's face. It realized another mistake. It had indulged in its desire to have fun with the girl for too long. That the opportunity that it had been waiting for had almost slipped by it. It was time that it took it. I wouldn't worry about that. A voice said. Why? Another asked. There the ears of Yakumo the shadow hear a commotion from outside the storage room. Its smile grew. It knew the perfect time to strike. It just had to be patient for a little longer. Outside the warehouse the first of the missing was dead. That much Itachi was certain as he went through another set of hand signs. The Uchiha prodigy had decided that subtlety was unnecessary for the mission. So, the group had blasted through the warehouse doors and charged at the missing nin. Before they had the chance to register what was happening, one of them had been struck in the throat by a kunai. An unceremonious way to die for a shinobi. But that was the kind of life they lived sometimes. Itachi finished his hand signs. Katan, fire dragon's breath. Itachi cupped his hands together in front of his mouth. Flames streamed out his mouth and funneled into and out of his hands, forming a dragon's head. The dragon then opened its mouth and breathed out a pillar of fire that shot towards that missing nin. By this point, the missing nin had recovered from the shock of being discovered and scattered from the attack. The pillar exploded where the group had been. Itachi didn't dwell on the missed attack and shifted out of the way of a hail of kunai and shuriken. They're real shinobi, all right. Itachi thought to himself. He had already known that based on the plan they employed to kidnap the Kurama girl. This had only cemented that in his mind. The hell? One of the missing nin shouted. How did they find us? The Konoha shinobi did not give their enemy time to ponder the question as they charged at the group. It doesn't matter now. One said, the leader. He went through a set of hand signs. Doton, earth whip. A whip made from rock ripped away from the ground and swung out at the Konoha forces. The group of 7 leaped above the whip and spread out to engage their chosen targets. Itachi landed close to the missing nin leader and charged at the man. Getting close to his opponent, the young ANBU commander assumed his clan's signature taijutsu style. The man who Itachi guessed was around the strength of mid-level jonin, possibly higher, quickly and masterfully parried all of Itachi's attacks. With his attack stalled, Itachi switched to a defensive as his opponent started to attack him with a flurry of jabs and kicks. Thanks to his Sharingan, Itachi saw each attack well before it ever came. Evidently, the man knew what he was going up against and kept up his attack and at a rapid pace, making it difficult for him to capitalize on any openings. You're not half bad, the man said. He went for a low sweeping kick. Itachi avoids it and the uppercut that after it. You are not a bad opponent either, Itachi commented, lashing out with a palm strike to the man's chest. His opponent parried the attack. Never thought I would be going up against an Uchiha, he said, parrying the attack. And Itachi no less. Itachi raised an eyebrow. You've heard of me? I don't think there's anyone in the elemental nations who hasn't heard of you, the missing nin leader said. He lowered himself and tried to go for Itachi's lower abdomen with a quick jab. Itachi twisted around to avoid the attack. If he were anyone else, Itachi might have taken pride in that fact. But as it were, it was just an advantage his opponent had over him. Is that so? Itachi simply said. You even have an entry on the bingo books. The man said. Then he jumped back to avoid several kunai. It was hard to tell if they were thrown at him purposely or if it was a stray attack. Either way, Itachi pressed on the advantage. Katan, fire bullet no jutsu. A spray of fiery bullets soared at the man, who jumped further back to avoid being burned alive. You have a flee on sight order. The man finished. A slight lull in the fight hung over the two combatants as they decided on their next course of action. Both were still mindful of the fights around them and the progress of them. As far as Itachi could tell, Konoha was winning the battle, but their enemy was making them work for their victory. Already one Konoha shinobi, a jonin, was down but still alive. That left both sides roughly even in numbers. From the corner of his eyes, Itachi saw that Izumi was fighting a muscular man. The pair of Anbu were double-teaming an opponent. If that is the case, Itachi began. Why not try to escape now? Or better yet, how about you surrender now? If this fight could be ended without bloodshed, then Itachi was willing to take it. Especially if it meant his brother wouldn't be put at risk. But he suspected that it wouldn't be that easy. The man smirked at him. Tempting, he said. But I'm afraid I'm going to have to say no. Professional standards and all. You understand? Itachi nodded, showing he did. Besides, even if I did try to escape, I suspect that I wouldn't get far. If you Konohanin knew we were here, then it would not surprise me if half of your forces were deployed to capture anyone trying to escape. No, I'm afraid this will be my last stand as a shinobi. There was anger in the man's voice but also resignation. He knew what the conclusion of this fight would be and had accepted it. Itachi had to give the man some respect for that. You do realize I have orders to capture you alive if possible? Itachi said, pulling out a sword. Of course. The man responded, pulling out a set of kunai. I imagine you want to know who hired us and how we managed to get into the village. But I won't make it easy for you. I will die as a proud shinobi and not as a screaming wreck in the depths of your T&I department. With that, both men knew that talk had ended. Itachi took a stance waiting for the man to charge at him. He didn't have to wait long as the man threw one of his weapons. Itachi deflected the incoming weapon, and in the same motion, his blade clashed with the man's second kunai. The battle had been joined. In the commotion, no one noticed one of the combatants slipping past. Storage room. The noise outside had not gone away and had grown louder. Naruto was smiling from ear to ear. I told you not to worry, he said. Sasuke looked back at his friend. Naruto? What did you do? He asked him. And what's going on out there? Isn't it obvious? Naruto answered back. Konoha is here to rescue us. They're being led by your brother. Itachi? Sasuke asked. He's here? But how? Yakumo was curious about that herself. She knew Hinata and the others had gone off to warn the rest of the village, but there was no way they could have known where the missing Nin had been holding up in. I showed them where we are. Naruto answered. But how? Kiba asked. No offense, but I think it's kind of hard to keep track of your eyes. I developed a new trick. Naruto explained. A new trick? Shikamaru questions with a raised eyebrow. A pair of eyes floated down and stared at the floor. Half a second later, a project of the inside of the warehouse appeared in front of the group of kids. And the battle was currently being waged just outside the storage room. Yakumo almost gasped at what she saw. Her mind tried to work out what she was seeing. It wasn't Genjutsu, or at least not one she had ever encountered. The image almost looked solid, like she could reach and touch it. Something that Kiba tried to do when his hand reached out to the projection. His hand passed through it, causing it to shimmer and distort like water would. Sasuke was staring at the image in disbelief. Meanwhile, Shikamaru was showing no outward reaction, but Yakumo could see that his mind was at work. Sasuke hovered his hand over the project. Is that really my brother? He pointed at the image of Itachi fighting one of the missing nin. Is this happening out there? It is. Naruto said. You can create live images of events as they happen? Shikamaru asked. Naruto nodded. No sound though. Still, Shikamaru trailed off. The uses that this technique has. Can you also play back images you've seen before? He asked. I think so. Naruto said. Yakumo spoke next. So, you transmitted our location to Konoha when you were caught? She asked. Just how far can you see with your eyes? She knew that the warehouse was on the edge of the village and the Hokage tower on the other side of the village. I had hoped we could tell Gigi ourselves, Naruto explained. But, well, you know what happened. As for how far I can see, I can be standing in the middle of Konoha and still see everything in the village and about 2 kilometers past the village walls. After that, things start to get fuzzy, and I need to concentrate to see clearly. That's incredible, Yakumo said. To be able to see that far. What she would give to have an ability like, instead of the curse. Sasuke nodded his head. I have to give it to you, dope. You did something smart. Some of the eyes floating around Naruto rolled. All of my plans are smart, duckass. Sometimes they just don't work. Sasuke snorted and turned back to face attention. See, I told you we would get out of this. And when we are, we'll help you with your problems. Yakumo smiled. For once, there truly was no doubt in her mind. For so long, it had felt like she had been walking in a dark tunnel. Now, after so long, she finally could see the light at the end. She opened her mouth to reply. I would not be so certain about that. A cold voice said. The next thing Yakumo knew, Naruto was launched at crates. With a loud crashing noise, the crates shattered. The thin man with the short sword stood where Naruto had been. An angry frown tight on his face. You little brat. He said. It's because of you that we're in this mess. He unsheathed his blade and walked towards the recovering Naruto. It's time I finish what I started. Bastard. Kiba shouted and leapt at the man. Kiba no. Shikamaru reached out to grab his friend. Too later. The man kicked his leg out and sent Kiba flying and crashing into another group of crates. Sasuke shot up from where he was kneeling. Before Yakumo could stop him, he charged at the shinobi. Get away from my frag. With a kick to his gut, Sasuke was sent back. He crashed next to Yakumo, breaking the crates behind them. Yakumo screamed. Sasuke. She looked over the boy, relieved he was still alive and conscious. She turned to face the man with angry tears streaming down her cheeks. Stop it. Stop it now. Or what? The man snarled at her. It's because of your little friends that our plan has fallen apart. And now, no chance we'll get out of this village. A twisted smile crossed his face. So now there's no reason to keep any of you alive anymore. He pointed his blade at Yakumo. I think I'll start with you, little girl. Or maybe. He shifted his blade to point at Sasuke. I'll kill off your little friends first. Make sure the last thing you'll ever hear are their screams for mercy. Yakumo had fallen silent. Then she spoke. Stop it, or else. She said in an icy tone. The man's smile grew more twisted. Or what? He said in a mocking tone. Yakumo did not answer the man. Instead, she reached into her kimono and pulled out a paintbrush. She points the brush at the man. The man looked amused. "What are you going to do with that?" he asked. "Paint me a picture?" "Sorry to break it to you, little girl, but I'm not an artsy type of person." Yakumo ignored the man and started to paint out something in the air. When she finished, she said one simple word. "Burn." The man's smile lasts for a second before a look of confusion spreads across his face. "What the? Where am I?" Then fear and horror quickly morphed across his face. He starts to scream. "No! Make it stop! Make it stop!" He shouted frantically as he dropped his sword and used his hands to slap and wipe himself off. "Make it stop! Make it stop!" His skin starts to turn red and blister. The others in the room looked on in confusion at what they were seeing. "What's happening?" Kiba asked. "I don't know," Sasuke said. "But it almost looks like he's on fire. But there's no flame." He looked over at Yakumo. "Yakumo, are you doing this?" "Yakumo?" Yakumo's whole body was shaking as tears were streaming down her eyes. "No. Please no," she said. "Not now. My turn." Sasuke runs up to her. "Yakumo? What's wrong?" he asked, trying to hold the girl steady. Yakumo looked at Sasuke. "Sasuke," she said, fighting to keep control. "Please run." "What? Guys?" Naruto said. "Is it bad that room is distorting, but the rest of the warehouse isn't?" "Yakumo, what's going on?" Sasuke asked in a frantic voice. "It's the shadow," Yakumo said, feeling her control slipping away fast. "It's trying to take over." Sasuke's eyes widen. "What?" Yakumo got off one last warning. "Run." Then the whole world exploded into fire and darkness. The only sound that could be heard above it was the laughter of a shadow. "Now, let's have some fun." Unknown Yakumo remembered a time when things were better. A time when the world seemed so much brighter. "Good job, Yakumo. You are the hope of our clan. My dear child." She remembers the warmth of her parents and how much they loved her. She remembered that her parents had a small garden outside their compound. It was not the grandest of gardens and did not have a wide variety of plants. But it was a peaceful place for Yakumo, and her father diligently tended to it. She remembered playing in that garden and how happy she was to be free from her daily responsibilities. Even as her burdens grew heavier and heavier. "Yakumo, you must learn to control your abilities." Even as the smiles turned to fear. Her parents offered her a safe refuge. "Yakumo, stop. You're losing control. Stop." There was a small bench in the middle of the garden where her mother liked to sit. After a long hard day with the clan, Yakumo would go to the garden and find her parents there. Her father would be tending to plants, sometimes watering them, sometimes trimming them. Her mother would be sitting on the bench watching him. Yakumo remembers that she would crawl into her mother's lap, and she would wrap her arms around her. In that garden, wrapped in her mother's arms, she felt safe. There were words too. Words of comfort, but something else as well. "Yakumo, my dear sweet child." Her mother whispered in her ear. "You must remember." Her lips moved, but no words left them. Yakumo strained herself to hear what mother said, but she heard nothing. That was when the embers consumed them. Yakumo had not been to that garden in a long time. Present Yakumo stood in the middle of the flames. Her face showed no outward trace of emotion, but it was clear she had been crying. "Why?" she spat. At the shadow. The shadow cackled. "Why are you doing this? Why must you torment me?" The shadow's laughter continued over the cracks of the flames. Haven't I told you this before? It said. I enjoy watching you suffer. What more reason do I need? Anger flashed across Yakumo. Then why do you hate me so much? Why do you enjoy tormenting me? The shadow frowned at her. Why do I hate you? It repeated her question. It walked to Yakumo. Yakumo tried to back away from the creature but suddenly found her back to a wall. The shadow grabbed her by her chin and looked into her eyes. Simple. It brought its mouth to her ear and whispered. What? Yakumo questioned. The shadow let her go and walked away. You hear me? It said nonchalantly. And soon enough, that little problem will be solved. But until then, I'm going to derive as much pleasure from this as I can. Yakumo balled her hands into fists. Fine. She said. If you must torment me, then so be it. But my friends. Her thoughts went out to Sasuke, Naruto, Shikamaru, and Kiba. She shuddered to think what the shadow was subjecting them to. Leave them out of this. The shadow smiled at her. They do mean something to you, don't they? It asked mockingly. Especially the Uchiha boy. An image of Sasuke flashed across Yakumo's mind. It has nothing to do with that. She said. They have done nothing to you, so don't drag them into this. The shadow began to cackle. It was an insane sound that seemed to shake the world around them. They have done nothing? It questions. They have nothing to do with this? That is where you are wrong, my dear. They have brought you hope and that I cannot tolerate. Yakumo bared her teeth. If you let them go, I'll surrender to you. She offered. The shadow's cackle had become a low chuckle. Little girl, you seem to fail to understand that you are in no position to bargain with me. The shadow started to walk around her. I do not need your surrender, as I have already defeated you. And letting your friends go? I do recall an interesting conversation. They were suddenly back in the warehouse, watching a scene play out. But why? Because I'm your friend, and I want to help you. I don't care if you can control this Edo or not. I'll help you fight until you can. If it takes control of you, I'll find a way to bring you back. If I get caught up in one of your genjutsus, I'll know I will be safe because you will be there to hold it back. You don't have to fight it alone, you have me now, and I'll help you. And we'll be there for you too. Yeah. If that creep does take you over, we'll beat it until it goes away. We're here for you. All of us, me, them. And others as well when you tell them. We'll all help. So, please. Let us help you. You don't have to fight on your own anymore. What a heartfelt if foolish declaration. The shadow said. Then it snapped its fingers, and the warehouse and her friends vanished in a blaze. That's what you're hedging your bets on, isn't it? You're hoping that if I let them go, they will find a way to free you from me. Yakumo was not going to answer the shadow's questions. They don't deserve to suffer. She said. The shadow ignored her comment. Even if I did let them go, their actions would be in vain. The idea of it would give you hope. It would give you the strength to resist me. I would, of course, eventually break you down. But I would rather get this over with now. The shadow stopped in front of Yakumo. I have had my fill of entertainment with you. It's time that we finish this little game. It grabbed her by her jaw. But before that, I will make your friends suffer in their own personal hells. Before they break, they will curse you for their torment. Yakumo's whole body was trembling with fear, rage, and despair. Monster. She whispers. The shadow smiled at her. Yes. But a monster of your own making. Yakumo dug her nails into the palm of her hands, feeling blood seep through. She ignored the sharp pain. "I won't let you," she said, taking a defiant step towards the shadow. "I'll fight you to keep them safe." The shadow looked amused. "And I'll enjoy breaking this sudden defiant streak you've developed." The flames around them suddenly began to shift. The flames swirled around the shadow. "I will remind you who is the true master of your mind." It held its arm out, and the fire spun up around it. A second later, Yakumo was forced to dodge a fireball. Sasuke the dead were everywhere. They were in the streets, in the houses. Lifeless bodies hung from the roofs and windows. No matter where the boy looked, he found nothing but death. "Please stop," he shouted. Sasuke ran as far as he could, hoping to escape the nightmare. He did not know how Mace to be here. One moment he was in the storage room of an abandoned warehouse offering words of comfort to Yakumo. Then he found himself here. Back to the night that changed his life. The night still haunted his dreams. The night his clansmen fell upon one another. But Sasuke quickly learned that this was no mere memory. It was a twisted, nightmarish version of it. Everywhere he went he saw more dead bodies. They all bear the iconic red and white fan of the Uchiha clan. The faces were familiar. One belonged to his uncle. Another a distant cousin. But so many had the faces of people he was close to. His mother, his brother, Shisui, and even his father. Their faces were twisted in pain and horror. "Stop this. Stop this pointless fighting," he pleaded again. "Stop killing each other." He tried to ignore them and look at the path straight ahead. Even when he tried to close his eyes, he saw the faces. Pale and covered in blood and mocking him for his weakness. He heard the distant sounds of battle. Sasuke ran faster, hoping to reach the sounds and stop this horror from claiming everything he held dear to him. To his relief, he reached where the sounds were. He soon wished he hadn't. What he saw was unexpected. A lone shadowy figure stood against two others. Both were older than he expected. One was a male with yellow hair and wore the robes of a Hokage with splashes of orange in it. On the hat, the kanji for 5 stood out, and hundreds of pairs of eyes surrounded the man. Naruto. The other was a woman. She was stunningly beautiful in her lavender battle kimono. The woman almost looked like she had descended from the moon. Hinata. Relief flooded through Sasuke as he ran past the shadowy figure. His friends had come to save him from this nightmare. He got a glimpse of the hate on their faces before he was forced to dodge a palm strike from Hinata. A Juken-powered palm strike to his heart. "What?" the Uchiha said before moving out of the way of Naruto's eyes came down on him with their chakra beams. It surprised him how easily and fluidly he moved across the streets, turned battlefield. More attacks came at him. Sasuke couldn't understand it. Why were Naruto and Hinata attacking him? They were his friends, right? Sasuke jumped back, avoiding a combined strike from the two. Now that there was some distance between them, he looked up at the two. He was taken aback with how much hate they were directing at him. "What is wrong with you two?" he asked the two grown versions of his friends. "Why are you attacking me?" Naruto snarled at him. Snarled. "Don't act innocent," he said. "Especially after what you've done." "What I've done?" Sasuke parroted. "What did I do?" Hinata spoke in a haughty voice. It was unnatural coming from her. "Don't pretend you don't know. Just look around. All of this is your fault." Sasuke felt his eyes widen. He looked around the streets of his clan's compound. He took in the ruin and the dead. "How is this my fault?" he asked. He did not like the answer he received. Least of all from its source. "So, what if it is?" A familiar and, at the same time strange voice answered. Sasuke looked behind him as the third figure came into view. He was older now. His eyes swirled around with red and black in a maddening spin. It was all for my benefit. The Sasuke thing said in a low tone, void of any emotion. He held out a single, crimson-stained katana. Sasuke could not believe his eyes. He refused to believe what he was seeing. There was no way he could do all of this. Yet he couldn't tear his eyes from what he was seeing. "You bastard!" Naruto shouted. "Why did you have to do this?" The Sasuke thing walked up to the real Sasuke. He tried to stop the figure. He pushed his arms out to stop the figure. But they phased through the man as he walked through Sasuke. The experience gave Sasuke a cold chill. Memories flood through Sasuke. A hunger for power no matter the cost and a lifetime of plotting. Then the moment finally came when his patience paid off, and he slaughtered his so-called friends and family. Only Naruto and Hinata stood in his way now. This can't be. Sasuke thought to himself. There was no way he would do anything like this. He would never turn on his friends like this. He would never kill his family. This was a nightmare, and Sasuke could not wake up from it. "It's because you stand in my way," the Sasuke thing said. He swung out his sword. "And because I want to," he shouted, charging at Naruto and Hinata. "No, stop!" Sasuke shouted out at the three as they clashed. "You can't do this. This can't be real." Then his perception changed. He was no longer an observer of the battle, watching his older self fight his friends. Now he was his older self. He swung his blade down on Hinata. "No!" Sasuke mentally shouted, willing himself to stop. His body wouldn't. He was helpless, watching as his body moved under someone or something else's will. "Power." His voice said, but it wasn't him. "Power is all I desire. It is the only thing that matters. Anyone who stands in my way must die." Hinata tried to move out of the way of the blade. But she was too slow, and an arm went flying. She screamed, and so did Naruto. "No, please don't." In the same motion, he stabbed Hinata through the heart. Shock and horror spread across the older Hinata's face before Sasuke withdrew his blade, and she fell over, dying. "This can't be real," Sasuke pleaded. "I would never do this." "Would you?" A voice spoke in his head. It was his, and yet it couldn't be. "Who are you? Show yourself," he said, trying to look around. But was unable to tear his eyes away from an enraged Naruto as he charged at him. "I am you," the voice said. "Or rather, I am your deepest desire." "My desire?" Sasuke asked. "Is this what I desire? But that can't be. I would ever do any of this." "Don't lie to yourself," the voice mocked. "Admit it. You've always wanted this to happen. You are an Uchiha and all Uchiha desire power more than anything else. You're no different. Anyone who stands in your must be cast aside. But these are my friends and family." Sasuke tried to gesture to the bodies all around him. But he swung out his sword at Naruto. Thankfully, the blonde was able to avoid the attack. The voice chuckled. "Friends? Family?" it mocked. "What do these things mean to men like us? We have no use for such things. They are only useful tools to be discarded once our goal has been achieved." "You're lying. I don't want." "Naruto. Watch out!" Sasuke shouted. But too late, his blade cut through his friend's neck, causing his head to fly away. Sasuke wanted to throw up and see the spray of red coming from the headless body as it tumbled over. He stood gazing at all bodies around him. His father and mother. His brother and other clansmen. Now his friends joined the pile of dead. Sasuke wanted to shut his eyes and run away from the terrible sight. But again, his body refused to listen to his commands. Instead, laughter seeped from his mouth. It was the laughter of a madman. Power is the only thing that matters. It is all we desire, and you will stop at nothing to achieve it. The voice whispered in his head. Then once more, Sasuke found himself running through the ruins of his home. Running towards the sounds of battle. He had to stop it. He had to stop himself before it was too late. Sasuke was in a nightmare. Shikamaru, he had failed. Again. I win in 10 moves, his opponent said. Images flashed into the boy's mind. Images of once brilliant plans falling apart, costing the lives of his comrades, friends, and family. Failure after failure piled on, costing more lives, more territory lost, and Konoha driven back. Again, Shikamaru said. The images ended in the same thing. His village was left in ruins as foreign soldiers marched down its streets, killing all they found. Male, female, young and old, no one was spared. His opponent, a dark reflection, smirked at him. When will you admit defeat? Isn't it too troublesome? Shikamaru kept his eyes from narrowing at his other self. He was not going to give the thing the response it desired. That would be troublesome. Again. Shikamaru said, watching as the shogi table rearranged itself, and they had a new game to play. His recollection of the events that led him here, facing himself, was hazy. But he did have a general idea of what happened. He and the others had been in the storage when one of the missing nin tried to kill them. Yakumo had tried something to stop the man with one of her genjutsus, he concluded. Something went wrong, and the world around them exploded into fire and darkness. Shikamaru woke up here, a shogi table laid out, and across from him, a dark reflection of himself. He and, by extension, the others had been trapped in the genjutsu. Obviously, his first act was to dispel it. He failed. This was no ordinary genjutsu. He was trapped in a world of illusion. This Ito is something else. Shikamaru knew full who was to blame. Between the images of his failures, he saw Yakumo laughing at him. Mocking him for his failures. Shikamaru was no fool. He knew that T wasn't Yakumo. The Ito was the one that trapped them here. It didn't take long for the Nara genius to figure out the monster's plan. It was forcing him and, most likely, the others to face their worst fears. Trying to torment them to the breaking point. But before, it wanted them to think that it was Yakumo's fault. For Shikamaru, it would seem his fear was of failure and the consequences that came with them. He moved his first piece on the board. You move. In his mind, images flashed. Konoha nin sneaking into an enemy fortress through paths unseen. His other self was quick to make their move. He moved his piece. In his mind, he saw those same nin caught and killed to the lost man. Another failure. When will you admit failure? His other self said. Isn't all this effort too troublesome for you? Can't you admit that no matter what you do, it will end badly for you? Shikamaru ignored the thing and focused on the board. Hundreds of scenarios played out in his mind. He knew he couldn't win against this thing, but he had to wait until he or one of the others found a way out of here. Until then, he had to play the Ito's game. Kiba, he was too weak. All around him, his home lay in ruins. The bodies of the dead were spread out all around him. His friends, his family, his comrades, and everyone living in the village were all killed by the enemy. All because he was too weak. And they blamed him for that. How can you be so weak? One villager said. How can you think of yourself as a man? A woman said. Why did you let me die? A child asked. Kiba ignored them and ran. Come on, Akamaru. he said to his partner. Akamaru barked at him and ran after him. If there was one consolation in all of this, it was he at least had his partner at his side. Kiba still didn't quite understand what was going on. One moment he and his friends were trapped in the warehouse's storage room, being attacked by one of their captors. Then an explosion of fire and darkness consumed them all. When Kiba and Akamaru woke next, they found themselves in this nightmare world. At first, Kiba thought he was trapped in a twist genjutsu and tried to dispel it. When that didn't work, Kiba knew he was in trouble. Now Kiba would admit that he wasn't the sharpest kunai in the pouch. But even he understood that something was very wrong here. He knew this wasn't the real world, everything felt off to him. The sounds, the way everything smelt, and even the way everything felt when he touched them felt wrong to it. This wasn't the real world, but at the same time, he knew this was no simple genjutsu. A world of illusion. Yakumo had trapped them in a nightmarish world of their fears and doubts. It was only a stray thought that lasted for just a second. Even still, Kiba squished it ruthlessly and felt guilty. This wasn't her fault. He remembers her trying to save them and warn them before everything went topsy-turvy. He also remembered the Ito she told them about. That thing had hijacked her genjutsu and forced them into this nightmare. Kiba growled. "That bastard," he said. "If I see that thing, I'll punch it in the face." He heard Akamaru bark in agreement next to him. They passed more ruined buildings and more dead. "How can you call yourself Konoha Shinobi?" one corpse said. "You runt, you've brought shame to our clan." An Inazuka body said. "I should have never given birth to you." His mother's lifeless form said. Now that one stung. Kiba pressed on, ignoring the insults and accusations. There had to be survivors somewhere. Someone who had not been killed by the enemy. At every turn, on every street, he saw more dead, more ruins. "You were weak. How dare you think of yourself as an alpha when you're so weak? I've met squirrels tougher than you." In the distance, he saw the Hokage monument collapse, sending clouds of dust everywhere. He came to the Hokage tower and felt a rush of relief flood in. He saw a group of survivors huddled together near the ruined building. 24 people, none of them shinobi. That relief quickly vanished when he saw a group of enemies preparing an attack. Kiba growled and hastened his steps. Akamaru sped up next to him. He wasn't going to fail here. Not again. He had to reach them. He had to save them. Too many times, he had failed. Sometimes because he was a second too slow. Other times because he did not have the strength to push the enemy back. All his failures were because he was too weak. But not this time. He was going to save them. He was faster, stronger. There was nothing he couldn't do. He reached out to the survivors, ready to push them out of the way of the attack. He was a second too late. The survivors screamed out as fire consumed them. Kiba fell to his knees, feeling tears running down from his eyes. The fires died down quickly, leaving charred corpses that mocked him. Too slow. Too slow. Too slow. Too slow. Too slow. Too slow. Kiba covered his ears to block out the mocking voices. But he still heard them. The enemy surrounds him, chanting the same thing over and over again. Weak. 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 Kiba stood on his feet. Somehow, he knew there was no one else alive. He and Akamaru were all that was left of the village. That would not last for long. He felt his hands ball into fists. He might have failed, but he could at least try to avenge everyone. Failing that, he was going to take as many of these bastards with him before they got to him. He charged at the enemy, swiping a claw out. He actually got one of them. They vanished in a puff of black clouds. He got another and another before he heard loud barking. Kiba turned his head to see his partner stabbed in the stomach by the enemy. Akamaru. Kiba said, cutting down another of the enemy. He charged toward his partner. Getting to the small dog, Kiba fell to his knees and cradled his dying partner in his arms. "I'm so sorry." Kiba sobbed out. He failed again. He felt a sharp pain in his chest, almost causing him to drop his partner. Looking down, he saw a blade extending out from his chest. Kiba died. The nightmare repeated itself. Naruto ran from the angry crowd. He ran as far as his feet would allow him. Monster. Demon. Murder. He didn't know what was happening. The first thing he remembers is being in the storage room with the others. Then an explosion of fire and darkness happened, and he woke up in the middle of Konoha. Understandably, he was more than a bit confused. But he took it as a chance to save the others and ran to Hokage. He hoped to warn the old man. He should have known something was wrong. The people in the streets were angrier than usual. Hushed whispers of "that boy" and "why is he here" were more frequent than they had been in years. Some even openly insulted him and threw things at him. Of course, he had been confused. But he shrugged it off. Years of this treatment had conditioned him to expect this treatment. Even sometime after he had been taken in by the Hyuga and offered their protection, he was still used to it. He understood where their anger was coming from, and one day he would help them see past it. Until then, he ignored them and made his way to the Hokage. That was when his nightmare truly began. Arriving at the Hokage tower, a crowd greeted him, more like a mob of people. Among them were all his friends. He had been relieved at seeing them. He thought that somehow, they all had been rescued, or maybe the whole thing was just a bad dream he had. Monster. Demon. Murderer. Why did you lie to us? They attacked him. Call all the terrible things the other villagers did. They claimed he had deceived them, and he was little more than a demon in human flesh. From anyone else, he would ignore them. But coming from those he considered his friends, it hurt. The old man was even among them, snarling at him, saying he should have put him down a long time ago. Naruto was forced to run from the angry crowd. With each step, he heard more hurtful things. Angry accusations. Monster. Why did you take me, son, from me? Give him back. Demon. Why did you lie to us? Murderer. It's time we got rid of you. Why? Why was everyone turning against him like this? What did he do to deserve this? He didn't do all the terrible things. He didn't kill anyone, and he didn't lie to people. A kunai was thrown his way. Naruto jumped to avoid it. The crowd was gaining on him. He looked everywhere, hoping to find some way to escape. He saw the rooftops and remembered that most people couldn't jump up there or move across them. Sure, there were shinobi in the mob. But he would lose most of the crowd and have a freer range of movement. He leaped to one of the rooftops and crashed into some unseen barrier. He was sent crashing back into the streets. Dazed and confused, Naruto got back to his feet. What? Why? He asked. The shouts of the mob grew louder and more triumphant as they seemed to realize that there was no way for him to escape. Kill the demon, Sasuke said. He cannot lie his way out of this. Hinata angrily growled. Let us finish what the yondaime could not. The man commanded. Naruto darted into the alleyways, avoiding a hail of thrown objects. With every twist and turn of the maze of alleys, Naruto's heart grew. He was going to get away. He was going to lose them. When he did, he would find somewhere safe and figure out what was happening. Unfortunately, even fate had turned on him. He took a wrong turn and came face to face with a dead end. A wall that seems to extend to impossible heights. Naruto turned around to take another way and stopped. The mob had appeared right behind him, radiating an oppressive aura. Naruto slowly backed away and found his back literally to the wall. Please don't. Naruto pleaded with the angry mob. I didn't do anything wrong. Demon. Monster. Murderer. The mob kept chanting, slowly approaching him. Weapons of all sizes and shapes. Some in the crowd even looked ready to beat him to death with their bare hands. Tears streamed down Naruto's cheeks. Why was this happening? What did he do to deserve this? The mob was just a few inches away from him now. Close enough, he could make out the faces of his friends. The old man, Sasuke, Hinata, Shikamaru, Ino, Choji, Kiba, Shino, and even old man Tucci and his daughter from his favorite ramen stand. They all hated him. Monster. Demon. Murderer. We shall finish what the Yondaime started. Naruto closed his eyes, not wanting to see what was coming next. He waits for death to take him. There was a whooshing sound followed by screams and shouts. Second, past the noises died down. Still, Naruto waited. Nothing happened. You can open your eyes now, Kit. A voice said. Naruto opened his eyes. Naruto almost gasped at what he saw. In all his nine-tailed glory, though a lot smaller, Kurama stood in front of him. Kurama? Naruto asked, surprised, and relieved at seeing a friendly face here. What are? He stopped short in his questions when he looked behind the nine-tailed fox. Bodies of the mob torn to pieces and burned to a crisp. Naruto was horrified, taking another step back. Kurama? Naruto asked, what did you do? The fox raised an eyebrow and looked back at his handiwork. He looked back at Naruto with a sigh. Do not be afraid, Kit. They are only an illusion. An illusion? Naruto questioned. What do you mean? Have you finally lost your mind, you crazy fox? That was when the bodies started to flicker and distort. What the? A moment passed, and the bodies vanished. He looked back at Kurama. What? What just happened? I told you, Kit. What you saw was an illusion. The fox looked up at the sky. As did Naruto. He almost took a step back at seeing the swirls of green lights in a dark sky. In fact, everything here is an illusion. Am I in a genjutsu? Naruto asked. To test that theory, he put his hands together into a sign. Kai. He said, flaring his chakra. Nothing happened. If only it were that simple. Kurama commented. This is no simple genjutsu. This is a place where the lines between the mind and reality have been blurred. A world of illusion. Naruto blinked. Finally, for the first time since waking up, he became aware of his surroundings. Or rather how he perceives them. He held up his hand to his eye sockets and felt actual eyes in them. Kurama, what happened? He said, taking a moment to feel his eyes out. How did we get here? Kurama gave him a pointed look. Try to remember, Kit. He said. Think back to the moment before you woke up in this realm. Naruto concentrated, trying to recall his memories before waking up in this nightmare. It took him a moment, but the memories slowly trickled in. He and his friends were in the storage room listening to something that Yakumo was telling them. One of the attackers came in, angry and threatening to kill them. Then Yakumo did something to the man. Something that caused the man to scream in pain. Then? Naruto focused on the memory. Everything after that was a blur. We were in that storage room when one of the men tried to attack us. He said to Kurama. But then Yakumo did something to him. Put him under a genjutsu, I think. Go on. Kurama nodded at him. Focus on the memory. Try to recall what happened after that. Naruto remembered that Yakumo suddenly seized up and started to tremble. She was afraid. Very afraid. No. Please no. Not now. Please run. It's the shadow. It's trying to take over. Run. Then everything exploded into fire and shadow. Naruto almost felt like he was going to throw up. The Edo. Naruto said. Yakumo lost control and... Naruto paused, afraid to talk. And the Edo took over. We're trapped here because of that thing. Kurama nodded. This is a world of its making. He said, looking down the alley. More figures emerged. The villagers and his friend. All of them shoot angry expressions at Naruto. Murder. Monster. Demon. They chanted, among other things. Kurama flicked one of his tails, sending a shockwave toward the crowd. They vanished. From what I can see. This Edo or shadow as your friend called it. Has trapped you in a world where your deepest fears are manifest. Naruto heard more chanting. Murder. Monster. Demon. Naruto turned around, seeing that the dead end had vanished. Stretching out into another alley. A crowd was moving towards him. One of them threw something at him. A bottle, he thinks. It phased right through him. Naruto felt Kurama move behind him. Naruto held his arm out to stop the fox. Both looked at one another. Naruto gave the fox a sad smile. Kurama looked at him for a moment and nodded. He stepped back. Naruto looked back at the crowd, taking a deep breath. He walked towards them, ignoring their chants and taunts. More objects were thrown at him. More than a few of them were real weapons. They all phased through him. He stops in front of the crowd, facing an illusion of Hinata. What have to say, demon? The Hinata thing said. Naruto smiled and held his hand out. None of you are real. He said. Then with a wave of his hand, the crowd and the alley vanished. Naruto stood there for a moment, thinking. I'm surprised you didn't give them some speech about the power of friendship. Kurama said. Naruto felt the fox walk up behind him. Or claim that they would never turn on you like this. Or some other mallard. Naruto smiled. The eyes in his head vanished and a blindfold wrapped around his head. Several pairs of eyes shimmered into existence around the two. I could have. He said, turning to face the fox. But I know what I need to know. Kurama was right. This world had shown him his deepest fears. Even years later, after being treated so well by his friends, the Hyuga, the old man, and Hinata. He was still afraid of losing all of that. Worried that they were pretending to be nice to him. That one day, they would drop the act and show their true colors. That was something he was going to have to talk with them about. But not now. Right now, they had things to worry about. You said I was trapped in a world of my fears? He got a nod from the fox. What of the others? Sasuke, Shikamaru, and Kiba? My best guess is that they are trapped in their own nightmares. Kurama said. And unlike you, they don't have something like me to help them out. Naruto nodded. He imagined the shadow didn't consider the possibility that one of his victims was a Jinchuriki. If it was even aware of what a Jinchuriki was. Sometimes having a giant murder fox in his stomach had its advantages. Is there any way we can reach them? Naruto asked. This is a world of the mind. Kurama responded. If all your minds have been linked, then it should be possible to find the others by simply thinking of going to them. Naruto nodded. That made sense in a weird way. Good. Now, what about Yakumo? He asked. You have an idea of what's happening to her? Again, the nine-tailed fox gave him a pointed look. Kit, I believe you can answer that for yourself, he said. Naruto remained silent for a moment, his own suspicions having been confirmed by the fox. Then it's all the more reason for us to hurry, he said. I'm going to find the others. Hold on, Kit, Kurama said. I'm coming with you. You may need my help. Naruto looked at the fox in surprise. How? He asked. And even if you could, wouldn't the other recognize you? The tails are kind of a dead giveaway. If your minds are linked as I suspect, then I should be able to come with you with a problem. Then Kurama smirked. As for them recognizing me, I think I have a solution to that. Kiba, the village was burning. The dead littered the ruined landscape of his home. How can you be so weak? One villager said. How can you think of yourself as a man? A woman said. Why did you let me die? A child asked. The voices of the dead continued to mock him for his weakness. For letting them die. No matter what Kiba did, no matter how hard he fought, it was never enough. The enemy would always win. A shadow leapt at him, and he parried the attack. Just as quickly, he lashed out with his claws. The figure vanishes in a cloud of dark smoke. The Inuzuka boy continued to run through the ruins of his home. Akamaru was close behind him. He tried to ignore the ruins around him, to keep his eyes on the path ahead. Focus on finding someone, anyone who was still alive. Why did you let us die? Why weren't you stronger? You killed us. You and your weakness. How could he call himself a shinobi? A shinobi was strong and fast. They could do anything. A real shinobi would have never allowed this scene to play out. He ran past the ruins of his clan's compound. How dare you call yourself an Inuzuka? I always knew you would be a runt. Runt, I should have never had you. Kiba's eyes looked down at the road. How could he call himself an Inuzuka? They were everything a shinobi strived to be. Beside him, he heard the encouraging barks of his partner. Kiba looked at the small white dog. Akamaru continued to encourage him. Told him to keep pressing on. But even his expression told Kiba that the nightmare was starting to get to him. They passed more dead. More chanting reached their ears. Weak. Pathic. You let us die. Kiba wonders what sort of things his partner heard. They reached the center of the village. The cluster of survivors huddled together. Like always, the enemy surrounded them, and as always, one of them spotted him. They pointed at him, letting out an excited noise grabbing the attention of the others. They all looked on at him. Despair turned to hope. Save us. Save us. Save us. Kiba held back a fanged growl. He hated this part. The hope and excitement the survivors had at seeing him. He hated how they thought he would save them. He hated how the hope quickly turned back to despair as they burned. He hated how their cries for help turned to curses. No matter how many times he tried, how many of the enemies he cut through, or how close he got to the survivors, he would always fail. He wasn't strong enough. He wasn't fast enough, and he wasn't smart enough. But he kept trying anyways. No matter how weak he was, he had to keep trying. To give up would be the final failure. That was a weakness he refused to give into. Kiba charged past the enemy, cutting them down as they came at him. Akamaru was next to him, cutting through the enemy like he was. They got closer to the survivors than normal. However, as always, just when their goal seemed to be within reach, it slipped out from their fingers. As impossible as it was, the survivors suddenly shifted, and they were much further away from him and his partner. The distance between them stretched out into impossible lengths, yet Kiba could still clearly see their faces. Their hope turned to despair as balls of fire raced toward them. Kiba closed his eyes, not wanting to see what happened next. The sounds would be bad enough. He didn't want to see them die. He had failed again. More people had died because of him. Why wouldn't this nightmare end? Wasn't it clear to all by now he was weak? That he couldn't save anyone? How many times did he have to see this before the nightmare ended? He already knew the answer to that question. Kiba waited for the sounds of the dying, the curse that would come his way. He waited for the whole nightmare to repeat itself. Something different happened. He heard the flames reach their target. But the sound of death never reached his ears. He didn't hear the curses of his weakness. Instead, he hears cheers and a single loud voice. Kiba. That sounded a lot like Naruto. Kiba opened his eyes and almost felt his jaw hit the ground. The flames had not consumed the survivors. Instead, they licked at a transparent blue barrier. Inside the barrier, the survivors cheered and praised him. But his mind focused on the two figures in front of the group. One was obviously Naruto, which should have been impossible since Kiba saw his dead body at the village gates. The blindfolded boy had his hands out, almost like he was the one projecting the barrier. The other figure was someone he had never seen before. A tall, muscular man wearing a battle kimono that was mainly orange but had shades of red and yellow mixed in. It was like he was wearing fire itself. He had deep red hair that cascaded past his shoulders in 9 strands. Kiba. Naruto said. You alright? Kiba looked at the two wondering if they were real, if this was some trick. Naruto, is that you? He asked. Unfortunately, he didn't get a chance for an answer. The enemy appeared all around them and began their assault. Balls of fire rained down on the barrier projected by Naruto. The survivors within screamed and huddled together. No time for that. Naruto said. We need to end this. Kiba, you need to end this. What, how? Kiba asked Naruto. I can't do anything. He was too weak. Yes, you can. Naruto said firmly. The man with the red began to speak. In case you haven't noticed. This is a world of your fears and doubts. The only way for you to get is to face your fears. Face my fears? Kiba questioned. How can I do that? I can't do that. I'm too weak. No, you're not. Naruto said. You're much stronger than you think. You can do this. Kiba was not convinced. No, you're wrong. He gestured to the destruction around them. If I were strong enough, none of this would be happening. The village would not be in ruins, and everyone I care about wouldn't be dead. He knew none of this was real. That it was all an illusion meant to break him. But he also knew this nightmare was a reflection of what would happen. It showed him the ugly truth he had been trying to hide from himself. He was too weak to protect anyone. Naruto had a thoughtful expression on his face. For a moment, Kiba thought he might have gotten through to the boy. Not that it mattered. It wasn't really him. But it still hurt him. The enemy was descending on them. Kiba readied himself for the fight, ready for the nightmare to repeat. Then why do you keep fighting? The world around him slowed down. Kiba blinked. He hadn't expected that. What? Naruto repeated himself. Why do you keep fighting? Cracks were appearing in his barrier. Why do you keep going through this nightmare time and time again? If you really think yourself so weak, why haven't you accepted it? Why not let everything around you be destroyed? Because I have to. Kiba said. I have to keep fighting. I have to protect everyone. It was what a shinobi did. They had the strength to protect. But you just said that you're too weak. Naruto pointed out. If you're too weak to protect them, then why bother? Why bother? Kiba was surprised to hear something like that from Naruto. Even if it was a fake. Because I have to. This is my home. My friends and family live here. I have to protect them. Without them, nothing else matters. Kiba was a true Inuzuka. To them, nothing was more important than the pack. For Kiba, his pack was more than his clan. His pack was his family, his friends, and the rest of the village. To him, nothing was more important to him than his pack. He would do anything for his pack. So, of course, he would keep fighting, no matter how worthless it seemed. He didn't notice it back, the enemy around him distorted for a second. Naruto noticed though and smiled. Kiba, you are so much stronger than you think. Naruto said. You're not weak at all, Kiba. You have the strength to protect everyone. Then why have I failed again and again? Kiba said/shouted. Why couldn't I prevent our home from being destroyed? Why couldn't I stop it all? Because you're only one person. Naruto said simply. No matter how strong you are if you fight alone. That strength will mean nothing, you will always lose. But if others stand with you, nothing in this world can stop you. Kiba had forgotten one important thing. To an Inuzuka, nothing was more important than the pack. They would do anything for their pack. That much he understood. He would do anything for his pack, his family, his friends, and the village. But had forgotten that desire went both ways as the one who desired to protect the pack. The pack also looked out for its members. No one stood alone. No one lived alone. They stood together. Kiba had forgotten that, or maybe he never really understood it. He understood it now. Kiba felt his fears and doubts melt away as he finally realized that the Naruto thing. No. Naruto was right. Kiba was not weak. He turned to face the enemy coming down on him and fought. He kept fighting as the enemy came at him in waves. With each swipe of a claw, each jutsu unleashed, the enemy vanished in a puff of smoke. But they kept coming. A few slipped past him, charging towards the barrier. Kiba, though, only smiled. Even if they got past, even if he wasn't strong enough to stop them. The attackers vanished in clouds of smoke as previously unseen blades cut through them. Kiba was not fighting alone. Standing in front of the barrier, ready to protect the survivors at all costs, was an army of Konoha shinobi. Kiba kept fighting, knowing even if he did fail here, the others would not. But Kiba had no intention of failing. He was strong enough, fast enough, and maybe smart enough. He cut through the waves of enemies coming at him. Come on, Akamaru. Kiba said, tossing his partner a small pill. Akamaru barked, and the pill landed in his mouth. A puff of white enveloped the puppy. When it vanished, a clone of Kiba took his place. Beast mimicry, Fang over Fang. Both Kibas twist around, creating cyclones that overlap the other. They came crashing down on the enemy, eviscerating them. When both Kibas finished their attack, there was nothing left of the enemy. Akamaru returned to his normal form. That was when Kiba heard the cheers of the survivors. He turned around to face the crowds of people applauding him. Thank you. You save us. How can we ever repay you? Naruto and the mysterious man were smiling at him. Kiba smiled back at them and basked in the cheering of the crowds. Akamaru was excitedly barking and running around Kiba's legs. Then the crowd vanished, and Kiba heard silence. He frowned, he would have liked to enjoy that moment for a bit longer. Naruto ran up to him while the red-haired man walked. I told you you could do it. Naruto said with a wide grin. You are stronger than you think. Kiba showed Naruto an arrogant smirk. Well, I was only pretending to be weak, he said boastfully. There's no way I would ever be that pathetic. Right, Akamaru? Akamaru gave him a weak bark that translated as sure. Kiba frowned at his partner, hoping he would have received some more support from him. Kiba shook his head and looked back at Naruto. Well, thanks anyway, he said. But Naruto? How did you get here? He glanced at the man standing behind Naruto. Who's this guy? We're all trapped in the same Genjutsu, Naruto said, then corrected himself. Well, the same world of illusion. Okay, so that confirmed Kiba's suspicion that this was no simple Genjutsu. So, I was able to get you by just thinking of where you are. Okay, that makes sense. Kiba didn't want to think about it. Naruto looked at the man behind him. And this guy? The blindfolded boy hesitated for a moment. Let's just say he's an old friend of mine. You can call him Kurama. Kurama? Kiba asked. Like as in Yakumo Kurama? Had someone from her clan been caught up in this nightmare world? Naruto chuckled nervously and shook his head. No. No relation. At least not one I know of. He glanced at the man. The shrugged. It's not anything I can remember. The man named Kurama said. For whatever reason, his voice radiated power. Naruto turned his attention back to Kiba. Anyway, he helped me out of my nightmare. I see. Kiba said. He was unsure if he should trust the man. But if Naruto trusted him, he wasn't going to argue. So, what's the plan? He asked. We free the others and find Yakumo. Naruto explained. Then we all give this Edo the beatdown of its life. Kiba had a feral grin on. I like that plan, he said, smashing his fists together. So, who's next? I'm thinking Shikamaru. What do you want to bet? It's something lame like his mother yelling at him. I'll take that bet. Shikamaru, well, this is not what I expected. Kiba commented. Me, neither. Naruto said. But it's still something lame. So, who won? I did. Shikamaru felt a tick mark appear on his head. Would you guys get back on track? He asked the trio. He placed down his piece. His plans went into motion. Oh, right, sorry. Naruto said sheepishly. So let me get this straight. Shikamaru said, not taking his eyes off the board. His opponent was quick to counter his move, and he saw flashes of people dying because of his failure. Since we're all trapped in the same world of nightmares, the three of you were able to find me just by thinking of where I am. He wasn't going to think about it. It did make sense, though. And this guy? He tilted his toward the man with the long red hair. Is an old friend of Naruto and his name is Kurama. But no relation to Yakumo or her clan. That is correct. Kurama said. Okay, Shikamaru said. He was thinking of his next move. Now you said that the only way to get out of here is to face my fears. Is that right? The three nodded. Something like that. Naruto said. Shikamaru yawned. All right. He said, taking one of his pieces and placing it next to his opponent's king piece. Shogi. In his mind, he saw the enemy Kage being killed. After that, their army fell into disorder and was quickly defeated. His opponent looked at him in shock. You can't do that. His shadowy reflection protested. That's cheating. Shikamaru just shrugged. I just did. He said. Plus, I'm a shinobi. Cheating is a part of the deal. He got up as the board vanished. His opponent still protesting as it faded away. Naruto, Kiba, and Kurama were giving him deadpan looks. That was. Naruto started off. Anticlimactic. Kurama finished. What? Shikamaru questions. You said to face my fears. I did. The three continued to stare at him. You knew from the beginning? Didn't you? Naruto asked. Shikamaru shrugged. Then why didn't you do it sooner? Kiba asked. Too troublesome. Shikamaru said flatly. Plus, it was an interesting opponent. Facing my fears and doubts. Naruto sighed. Lazy pineapple. He muttered. Troublesome blonde. Shikamaru responded. So, what was that about who won? Nothing that concerns you. Naruto said. Come on, let's go. And Sasuke. Sasuke had lost count on how many times he had run through the streets. He was sure it was somewhere in the triple digits now, maybe even higher. No matter how often he repeated the action, he was always met with the same scenes. His home in ruins, and the dead of his clan littered the street. The dead were chanting now. Power is what matters. Nothing else is more important. Betray friends. Betray family. Anything to gain power. Nothing must stand in your way. Every time he passed the dead, he saw a reflection of himself cutting them down. I have to stop him. Sasuke said to himself. I have to stop myself. Stop it right there, traitor. A voice said. Sasuke looked up to see older versions of Ino and Kiba descending on him. No, please stop. Sasuke said. You have to understand. Like we'll listen to the words of a traitor. Ino said, charging at him. Kiba was close behind her. Please don't. But it was already too late. A shadow shot out from him. A moment later, both Ino and Kiba fell to the ground as they were sliced in two. The shadow landed behind the two. Sasuke wanted to scream. But the noise died in his throat at seeing the shadowy figure stand up and turn to face him. It was him. His older self twisted and distorted almost beyond recognition. Why do you feel so sorry for these people? The Sasuke thing asked him. Shouldn't you be happy that they're gone now? They were my friends. Sasuke shouted at himself. The older Sasuke scoffed and stuck his blade into the back of Kiba. Sasuke had to resist the urge to throw himself at the man. What use are friends? He mockingly asked. Especially with weaklings like this? He pulled his blade out and gave the lifeless boy a good kick. Bastard! Sasuke said. Why are you doing this? Why turn your back on everyone that you have ever known? How did I end up becoming like this? The older Sasuke smirked at him. You should already know the answer. He said. Two more figures emerged behind him. They were Naruto and Hinata. Traitor! We'll stop you here and now. The older Sasuke turned to face them. It is the same desire that all Uchiha have. Power. He leaped at the two. Sasuke tried to run toward the three to stop the battle. To stop himself. But his feet were weighed down, unable to move. No, Sasuke whispers. I would never. I'm like you. I'm not like them. In his mind, he saw the night that his clan almost tore itself apart. The greed and desire for power that had nearly driven his clan to turn on the village. He didn't have any of that. None of it. But there was always that small shadow of doubt. Don't lie to yourself. A voice whispered in his ear. Sasuke looked over, seeing a second version of his older self standing beside him. You have that same desire as all Uchiha have. No matter how much you try to hide it. It has been festering inside of you. Driving you, dictating your every action. You want power, and you will do anything to get it. The other Sasuke wounded Hinata, slicing at her arm. She would have died had Naruto not intervened with a timely blast from his eyes. I would never. Sasuke tried to defend himself. I would never do any of this. The older Sasuke next to him smirked. But you will. He said with confidence in his voice. Power is the only thing that matters. That is the Uchiha way. Our way. Your way. But Sasuke hesitated for a moment. Was this man right? Was he no different from the rest of his clan? Was there no escaping from his future? Two wouldn't. Would he? Again, the other Sasuke smirked. He opened his mouth to say something. Don't you listen to this bastard. A voice cut him off. Both Sasukes looked back in surprise. Just as two orange tails wrapped themselves around the older Sasuke's neck, lifting him in the air. It might be an illusion. But I'm still going to enjoy this. A man with orange hair that fell into 9 strands. 2 of which were extended out and wrapped around the older Sasuke's neck. Behind him were 3 others. Naruto, Shikamaru, and Kiba with his pet dog on his head. Sasuke could not believe his eyes. Kiba was supposed to be dead. And Naruto was behind him, fighting the other older Sasuke. Sasuke looked back at the fight just to confirm what he was seeing. Yep, an older Naruto fighting it out with the other older Sasuke. He looked back at the group of 4. He was sure he had seen Shikamaru's corpse somewhere. And who was this man standing in front of them? Sasuke heard a loud cracking noise, quickly followed by a popping noise. He looked over to see the older Sasuke go limp and fall to the ground, vanishing in a puff of smoke. A chill went down Sasuke's spine. He looked back at the newcomers. What? Sasuke asked. What are you? Were they real? Was this some new twist on his nightmare? But something deep in him told him they were real. Naruto looked up at the battle. Well, Sasuke, I'm flattered that you think I will turn out so handsome when I'm older. Are you sure you're not into guys? Because let me tell you, I don't swing that way. Yep, that was definitely Naruto. Sasuke sighed. Dope, he said, with a smile. Then that smile falters for a moment. What are you doing here? How did you get here? And who's this guy? He pointed at the man in front of them. Questions for later. Shikamaru quickly said. Right now, we got other stuff to take care of. Yeah, like stopping your. Naruto said, trailing off. Like stopping your older self? From killing Hinata and me? This is a weird place. But how? Sasuke asks. How can we stop? He looked back over at the battle. How can we stop myself? He looked back at Naruto and the others. Easy. You just have to face your fears. Naruto said. Face my fears? Sasuke repeats. How? Naruto remained silent for a long time. For a moment, Sasuke was afraid that the boy wouldn't have an answer. Then he opened his mouth to speak. You're still afraid of yourself? Aren't you? Silence fell over the area. Even the sounds of battle did not reach Sasuke's ears. What? Naruto just smiled at him. By now, you must have realized what this place is, right? Naruto asked him. This place is a reflection of your fears and doubts. The blindfolded boy looked around. From what I'm seeing, you're still afraid of what you will become. Sasuke remained silent, unable to dispute what Naruto was saying. What if I really do become like him? Sasuke said, referring to his older self. What if this isn't some nightmare? But a vision of my future? Sasuke, Naruto said. That won't happen. You won't become like him. Both boys looked at the battle. It looked like it had reached some form of stalemate. But Sasuke knew what the outcome would be. How can you be so sure? Sasuke asked. What if I really do desire power more than anything else? What if I'm willing to do anything to gain that power? Even hurting you or the others? Because you're not that kind of man. Naruto answered. You're better than that. The very fact that you are worried about that proves it. But, Sasuke tried to argue. Sasuke, do you remember the promise we made? Naruto cut him off. Promise? Sasuke asked. It wasn't long before the incident with your clan. Naruto said. We were hanging outside the academy. Sasuke looked back over his memories of that time. It was difficult to find the memory buried deep under others that surrounded that dark time in his life. Sasuke, we are friends. No matter how tough things get or what happens in the future. We'll be there for each other. Even if you do turn against us, we'll be there to turn you back. We'll help you no matter what happens. Even if you run far away from here, run to the ends of the earth, we'll be right behind you to bring you back. Even if we have to break every bone in your body, we'll drag you back to the village. That's what friends are for. You, Hinata, and me, we're friends. We'll always be there for each other. Always. He grasps his hand around theirs. We'll always be here for you. A soft smile was on Sasuke's face. So, you do remember. Naruto stated. On that day Hinata and I made you a promise. We promised that if you did, turned out like this. That we would be there to drag you back. No matter what. Even if it meant breaking every bone in my body. Sasuke finished. Naruto nodded. That promise still stands. He said. If you can't have faith in yourself, then have faith in us. He held his hands out to the others. We'll be there to keep you on the straight and narrow. If you do go off it, we'll drag you back. Troublesome as it would be more troublesome to leave you to your devices. Shikamaru said. So, you can count on us. Kiba had a feral grin. Naruto's right, if you do become some power-obsessed bastard, we'll break every bone in your body and drag you back. You can count on that. Naruto and Shikamaru were giving the Inuzuka boy a deadpan stare. Even Akamaru was giving him a blank stare. Kiba, that's only if we have to. Kiba's grin grew. Come on, Naruto, you know how stubborn duck but is here. Sasuke suppressed a scowl. His hair did not look like a duck's but. He won't listen to a word you say until you've beaten him senseless. The eyes around Naruto rolled. Even so. I would prefer to talk him down than beat him up. The blonde shook his head. Kiba's eagerness aside, we're here for you, Sasuke. Sasuke had a smile on the whole time. Was it possible that he wouldn't turn out like the nightmare was showing him? Were his fears unfounded? Do not listen to them. A voice whispered in his ear. Startled, Sasuke looked over to see another clone of the older Sasuke standing beside him. These friends, he spat out venomously. Can't keep their promise. Power is all that matters. Nothing else. You again? Naruto said, his eyes flying around the air surrounding the other Sasuke. Kiba and Shikamaru got into fighting stances. The man, though, remained still. Uchiha, the man said, crossing his arms. Listen well because you will never hear me utter these words again. I have met many members of your clan, and I do not have a strong appreciation for them. You, however, are among the few I can respect. Sasuke looked at the man in surprise. He didn't know who this man was, but somehow Sasuke felt that what he was saying meant something. So, believe me when I say that you are nothing like what this shadow is showing you. The man continued. Nothing is set in stone for you. Only you alone can decide what your fate is. Sasuke remained silent for a long time. Are you really going to listen to the words of your so-called friends? His older self asked. And words of a stranger? The thing sounded wanty, but Sasuke could hear the edge in its voice. That was all Sasuke needed to hear. Yes, I am. Sasuke said, standing up and facing the other Sasuke. A flash of anger spread across the other's face. There was something else in there too. You're deceiving yourself if you believe the words of those fools. The only fool here is you. Sasuke said, taking a step towards his other self. You dare. The other's retort was cut short when a blade pierced through his neck. Courtesy of the younger and real Sasuke. I will never become like you. He said, twisting the blade around. I will never turn on those I call friends. Not for anything. Not for power. Not for wealth. And certainly not for you. He pulled the blade out and aimed for the older Sasuke's neck with a single swing. Then, suddenly everything shifted again. He wasn't on the ground in front of his friends. He was up in the air where the battle he was helpless to watch a moment ago was. Behind him were the representations of the other Naruto and Hinata. The other Sasuke only had a moment for a look of surprise and horror to spread across his face. Before his head was separated from his shoulders. His body and the body of the other Sasuke on the street vanished in clouds of darkness. I know who I am. Sasuke said, landing on his feet. The blade in his hand shimmered and vanished. He turned to face the other Naruto and Hinata, both of whom were smiling at him. They gave him a knowing nod before they shimmered and vanished. Sasuke smiled to himself and turned back to face the group of four. Naruto, Kiba, and Shikamaru ran up to him. While the mysterious man walked closely behind them. Sasuke, you were awesome. Naruto shouted. That was great. Sasuke gave his friend a smirk. Of course, I was. He said. After all, I'm not a dope like you. Naruto feigned a frown, with some of his eyes rolling. Oh, don't give me that Uchiha elite bullcrap. He said. Sasuke continued to smile at his friend. Whatever. He said. Then his expression softened for a second. But thank you. It was a quiet whisper, something that only Naruto would hear. The blindfolded boy nodded at him. Sasuke looked at the man. He had never met this man before, but somehow, he felt something was off about him. Naruto, Sasuke began. Who is? Naruto cut him off. I know you have a lot of questions. But right now, we have something more pressing to take care of. Sasuke gave the blonde a questioning expression. Then nodded. He was right. They had other things to take care of. Questions could come later. Right now, it was payback time. Come on, let's go. Sasuke said, walking past his friends. Let's get Yakumo out of this nightmare. Yeah, let's go save Sasuke's girlfriend. She's not my girlfriend. Yakumo, she didn't know how long she had been fighting the shadow. Days seemed to go by in an instant as their battle raged on. Had weeks passed? Weeks? Maybe even months or years? She couldn't tell. One thing she was sure of was that this battle was slowly turning against her. She was becoming exhausted. Not physically, as in a world of illusion and dreams, that physical body didn't matter. Though she imagined this wasn't doing wonders for it. No, she wasn't becoming physically exhausted. She was becoming mentally and spiritually exhausted. In a place like this, that was the worst thing that could happen. Yakumo dodged another fireball. Just barely, she felt the intense heat on her skin. In that same instant, she threw a kunai out from her sleeve. The small blade sailed through the air, aimed at the shadow's head. It passed right through it, doing no harm to the thing. The shadow cackled in glee as it lunged at Yakumo. Again, Yakumo tried to dodge the attack. But a clawed hand was able to rake across her arm. Yakumo screamed out in pain as she gripped her wounded arm. Before she could react, she felt a kick to the side and was sent flying into a nearby. With the wind knocked out of her, Yakumo fell to the ground in a heap. Yakumo held herself up with her good arm. The shadow was walking towards her, laughing. This had been continuing on since the beginning of the battle. If it could even be called that. Almost every second of the fight, Yakumo had been forced on the defensive, dodging the shadow's attacks. Most of the time, she barely managed to do that. But sometimes, an attack would make its mark on her. Bruises, gashes, and burn marks littered her body. Worse yet, when Yakumo did manage to get an attack in, it would do nothing to the monster. Either the attack would land on the shadow but fail to do anything. All the while, she was forced to listen to the chanting. Demon. Witch. No one will ever love you. And images of her friends being tormented flashed in her mind. Yakumo tried to get to her feet. But her legs gave out from under her, and she fell back to the ground. The shadow chuckled. My oh my. It said. Looks like reality is finally starting to set in for you. Flames started to surround the shadow and Yakumo. Yakumo propped herself up against the wall. What do you mean? That reality is setting in? She asked the shadow. The shadow smiled at her. A row of sharpened teeth on display. What I mean is that you're finally realizing the futility of fighting me. It said, standing in front of her. For so long, you've been fighting me for so long. I admit I enjoyed it for a time. Slowly leveling you down, showing you just how useless your efforts are. It wrapped a clawed hand around her chin. Yakumo recoiled from the creature's touch. Bastard! She spat at it. The shadow's smile faltered for a moment before it returned. That is precisely what I'm talking about. It said in a low growl. Even now, you still have some fight left in you. But that won't last for long. You are reaching your breaking point. It caressed a hand across her cheek. This time Yakumo did not recoil. Why don't you make things easier on yourself and submit already? Yakumo just glared at the shadow. The shadow looked like it was annoyed now. Come now. We both know how this will end. Just submit to me, and I promise you that all of this will end. All around them, shadowy figures appeared in the flames. Demon. Witch. No one will ever love you. Why did you do this to us, Yakumo? Yakumo wanted to cover her ears. She wanted to scream at the others for them to go away. But her arms refused to obey her. Why? She asked the shadow. Why are you doing this to me? The shadow rolled its eyes. Once again, you ask me that question. And once more, I will give you the same answer. It looked her directly in the eyes. The cloak of shadow lifted itself, revealing a face she had seen 1,000 times. A twisted reflection of her own. It is because I enjoy tormenting you. Because I hate you with every fiber of my being. I torment you because nothing else brings me more joy than seeing you suffer. And at last, I will see you break. Monster. Yakumo spat at her dark reflection. The shadow smiled. Remember what I told you, Yakumo. I may be a monster, but I am a monster of your own making. She said. Now I ask you one last time. Submit, or your last moments will be of agony. A large part of Yakumo wanted to take the shadow's offer. All the suffering she had endured. Flames exploded out from a bedroom door. Screams of agony echoed across the halls. Mocking voices surround her. Demon. Witch. Monster. No one will ever love you. No one wants to be around the witch like you. She wanted it all to end. But there was something else inside of her. A small voice that had been slowly growing louder. Fight. Memories and images flashed across her mind. A forest clearing with a lone tree in the middle. She was alone until a boy greeted her. Fight. She remembers the times she spent in clearing with the boy. How often they brought a smile to her face. How good it felt to be with someone else. Fight. And the words he and others said to her. Why they were always wanted to be around her. It's because we're friends, the boy said. And the words she always wanted to hear. I'm here for you. Fight. Yakumo mustered whatever strength she had left and slowly stood up, coming face to face with her shadow. I will never submit, she said. I will fight you. Her dark reflection scowled at her. I told you before, fighting is futile. I don't care how long it takes. I will break you. Her words came out as venom. But there was something else in there. An edge Yakumo had never heard before. It almost sounded like desperation. But before she could put more thought into it, the shadow raised a clawed hand and swung it down. Submit. Yakumo expected a lot of things to happen. She expected for the clawed hand to rake across her face. She expected that she would somehow avoid the incoming attack. She expected for any of 1,000 things to happen. What she did not expect was a flash of orange to stop the shadow's hand, and for a familiar voice to follow it. Don't listen to her. Sasuke's voice echoed in the air. The shadow's hand was inches away from Yakumo's face. Wrapped around her wrist was what looked like an orange tail. Yakumo looked over in the direction of the voice. Relief and surprise flooded over her, seeing her friends running up to her. Sasuke, Naruto, Kiba, Shikamaru, and a man she had never seen before. Yakumo raised an eyebrow at seeing his hair was the apparent source of the tail wrapped around the shadow's wrist. The group of 5 ran between Yakumo and the shadow, with the man taking a swipe at the shadow. The shadow leaped back, and the tail around her wrist returned to the man. Sasuke turned to face Yakumo. Yakumo. You, okay? He asked. The others had taken up defensive stances around her but were looking back at her with concern. Yakumo nodded. Yeah, I am. She answered. You're here. You're really here, aren't you? This isn't some trick from the shadow. Sasuke gave her a soft smile. I am, he said. We're all here. Yakumo smiled back at him, feeling like she was about to cry. I knew that you would escape from the shadow's trap. But She trailed off. I didn't know if you come for me. She finished her thought. I thought that I would have to fight the shadow on my own. Sasuke shook his head. We never abandon you, he said. Especially not to that thing. He turned to look at the shadow. It looks a lot like you, he commented. The shadow snorted. Of course, I look like her. I'm a part of her being. Her fears and desires embodied, she said. She took a step towards Yakumo. But the others were quick to step in front of Yakumo. We're not going to let you anywhere near Yakumo, Naruto said. The shadow smirked. Like you have a choice in the matter, she said. She raised her arm and waved it through the air. Trails of shadows flew out from the walls and wrapped themselves around the boys, lifting them into the air. Sasuke, though, leaped out of their way, landing beside Yakumo. Hey, what's the big idea? Kiba said, trying to break free from the shadow's grasp. Why can't we break free? The others were struggling as well. Except for the man with the orange hair, he glared at the shadow. You might have been able to escape from your nightmares. But you made a mistake by coming here. In your minds, my influence was limited. But here. The shadow gestured at Yakumo. In her mind, I have absolute control over everything. Which? Kiba shouted. The shadow chuckled. I believe you should be directing such comments at your friend here. She turned the boys around to face Yakumo. After all, it is her fault that you're here in the first place. More lies from what is little more than a rogue part of her mind. The man said. You're the one who dragged us here. And you're the one who refuses to face the truth. The shadow smirked at the man. She walked up to him and placed a hand on his face. Now you're an interesting one. She said. I've never seen anyone like you before. You can't be the man that tried to kill her and her friends. He's still trapped in his own little nightmare. Nor can you be any one of the kidnappers, or any of the rescuers. I would have known about any else trapped here. There was an almost annoyed tone in her voice. So, tell who or, she glanced over at Naruto. What are you? The man grinned at the shadow. It was eerily like Naruto's smile he got when he was planning one of his pranks. Only this one was more vicious. How about you let me go, and I can show you? He said. The shadow quirked an eyebrow. I think not. She said, taking her hand off the man. So, tell me, what was it you meant by, you're the one who refuses to face reality? Simple, the man said. As you said before, this is her mind. He tilted his head towards Yakumo. But you are not the Almighty here. She is. The shadow frowned for a second. She flicked a finger, causing the shadow wrapped around the man to stretch around his mouth. I think I've heard enough from you. She said, stepping away from the man. She turned away from him and started to walk towards Yakumo, ignoring the shouts from the boys. Sasuke stepped in front of Yakumo to protect her from the shadows. I won't let you hurt her. He growled. The shadow looked amused. How cute, she mocked. Your little friend wants to protect you. She flicked her wrist. Sasuke yelped as the trails of shadow emerged from below and wrapped around his body. He struggled against his bonds. Let me go. Even now, you struggle to protect her. The shadow said. She stopped in front of Sasuke. Why do you protect her? Why would you risk your life for her? It's her fault that you're trapped here. She's the reason you had to experience your worst nightmares manifested here. So why? Sasuke stopped his struggle and remained silent for several seconds. Why? He asked. Why am I doing this? He said, looking at the shadow. You ask me why I'm doing this? If you have to ask, then you won't understand. But it should be obvious to anyone that can. It's because I care about her. Yakumo Kurama is my friend, and I will do everything in my power to protect her from the likes of you. Yakumo had to stifle a gasp. Sasuke. She said. He didn't have to do this. He didn't have to risk his life for her. He didn't have to be friends with her. But yet he did. Sasuke turned his head to look at Yakumo. He gave her a smile that almost broke her heart. Yakumo, he started. I know you can do this. I know you can face the shadow. Yakumo took a step back. I can't. It's too strong for me. She's right. The shadow said. She is and always will be weak. My existence is proof of her weakness. Don't listen to that thing. Sasuke said. For so long, it's been trying to convince you that you're weak. That you can't do anything to stop it from taking over. But the truth is you have always been stronger than you think. The shadow fears you because it knows you can beat it. Lies. The shadow said. Don't listen to him. All he is doing is filling your head with false hopes. You can never defeat me. Listen to her voice. Sasuke said. Can't you hear the fear in her voice? You can. Sasuke's voice was muffled out as the shadow tendril wrapped around his mouth. She's heard enough from you. The shadow said in an agitated tone. All of you. She added as the others' mouths were muffled. Leave them alone. Yakumo said. The shadow looked at her with a bit of surprise before she gave her a mocking smile. I'm sorry. What did you say? She asked. She waved her around in the air, causing the tendrils wrapped around the others to constrict. Muffled screams reached Yakumo's ears. I said leave them alone. She repeated herself. She shakily got to her feet. The shadow smirked at her. Or what? She brushed one of her claws across Sasuke's cheek. A thin line of red opened, dripping down to his chin. You'll stop me? Yakumo balled her hands into fists. She had had enough. I will. She said, taking a step towards the shadow. Then came to a stop. She looked down to see that her feet were frozen to the ground by pools of darkness. She glared back at the shadow. I won't let you hurt him. She pulled her feet up, trying to free them. The shadow chuckled. Now, don't get so hasty. She said, raising her claws up to Sasuke's face. You'll get your turn when I'm done with him and then the rest of your friends. She put a single claw on the bridge of Sasuke's nose. Yakumo pulled harder on her feet. She had to stop the shadow. She had to save Sasuke. She had to save the others. Nothing else mattered to her at that moment. Not her fears. Not her doubts. Not her insecurities. Witch. Monster. Demon. No one will ever love you. Because we're your friends. The shadow reared back claw. Consider this my final gift to you. She said. Before I take your mind, your soul, and your body. I'll take your friends away from you. Then her claw descended. Thunk. Crack. The world had shifted. The shadow looked on in surprise. Impossible. She said, looking at Yakumo. Yakumo glared back at the shadow. Casting aside her broken hand, she almost threw the shadow to the ground. This is my world. My mind. She said. Behind her was an unharmed Sasuke. But I had you trapped. The shadow said, confusion and fear creeping into her voice. You can't have escaped. This is my world. You're supposed to be powerless here. She tried to rake her other set of claws at Yakumo. Crack. Only for the Kurama to grab her wrist and break it. Giving the shadow a set of matching broken hands. The shadow yelped in pain. Impossible. She said. She took a step back. For the first time in Yakumo's life, she was not the one experiencing fear. I told you this is my mind. My world. I decide the rules here. Not you. Yakumo took a step towards the shadow. Behind her, the tendril wrapped around Sasuke vanished, allowing him to fall to his feet. But. The shadow stammered. You're supposed to be afraid of me. You're the weak one here, not me. She pleaded as she took a step back. Then another, and another. Each step was mirrored by Yakumo as she got closer and closer to the shadow. Around them, the others were released. The flames that surrounded them flicker and die down. Not anymore. Yakumo said in an icy voice. Stay away from me. The shadow said, trying to take another step back. But in a twist of fate, her back hit a wall. Yakumo stood over the shadow, looking at her like she was beneath her. A katana suddenly appeared in her hand. She held the blade up, bringing the blade's tip to the shadow's throat. Submit. She said. The shadow let out a low growl. I will never. Her reputable was cut short as the blade was pressed onto her throat. A thin line of red trailed down. Submit. Yakumo repeats herself. The others gathered around the two, all of them shooting defiant glares at the shadow. The shadow glared back at all of them, almost daring Yakumo to finish the job. After the longest time, the shadow let a low growl. Very well, she said bitterly. You win. But don't start celebrating just yet. The form of the shadow starts to twist and distort. Around the children, the world began to fade away. You may have won today. But do not think for a moment that this is over. No matter far away you push me. No matter how deep in your mind you bury me. I will always be there, waiting for my moment. The moment you falter and show weakness, I will strike. Sasuke stepped beside Yakumo. And will be there to stop you, he said. The boys and the man stepped Yakumo. The shadow shot Sasuke a quick glare. You shouldn't get comfortable either, boy. At this point, the shadow had mostly faded away, appearing only as a thin outline. When I'm done with her, you're next. Then it was gone. Yakumo and her friends woke up. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.